Kapuia ke ala O ka pika ke I ka o ahe ahe A kamakani Aloha a e au I ka pua ume mau
Aloha everyone. So this beautiful song is called Le Pekaki. It's by Hapa, beautiful Hawaiian song that's about the beautiful pikake flower that smells like a gardenia. And of course, aloha to you, White Rabbit. So I really didn't hear much from you the other night during the live interview. So you didn't say anything in front of my face, but right behind my back the next day you had plenty to say. So, White Rabbit, I hope you took my advice and packed a lunch and kissed your mom, because today I'm taking you to school. So that I can take you on a journey from understanding to a much higher level of overstanding. But before we begin, please do me a favor and remove your religious, biblical blinders. Set aside and leave behind all of your religious dogma, because today we're going to enter into the real world and leave the fake world behind us, because today we are going on a journey of truth and wisdom. Truth is universal and absolute. It's like a circle or a wheel. So if you placed 360 people around that wheel and asked them to describe an object that you place in the center, you're going to get 360 different perspective views. A viewpoint opinion that is only relative to their perspective. So, for example, from White Rabbit's perspective, he assumes that I'm spewing bullshit. But the real truth is, from his religious perspective and his viewpoint, his limited, ignorant understanding of the actual truth is why you assume, Mr. Rabbit, that I'm wrong. But the truth is, you're wrong. So now I'm going to take you from a lower, basic, novice, level 1 understanding to a higher level of overstanding. So the White Rabbit says, that I've tainted the language and, I'm wrong and I'm a clown, dumbass, and all that stuff. Anyway, let's hear what he has to say. One of his claims in this video was that the word rapture breaks down to Ra-Pichur and derives from the Egyptian god Ra, which is the sun god. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Rapture comes from the word raptura, which means a seizing and a carrying off. Anyway, he goes on to say, it comes from the sun, the light, blah, blah, blah. So, let's get down to the nitty-gritty and let's see who holds the absolute truth in their hands. So, White Rabbit, it's your conjecture that the word rapture does not mean nor is related to the Egyptian god Ra, and you said it means a seizing and a carrying off, which I'll cover later. And you made a statement saying that the word rapture doesn't even exist in the Bible, and that is true, because actually no English word whatsoever exists in the Bible, because it's all translated from the Hebrew to the Greek to the English. So they could have used the word rapture, but they didn't. You're correct. Unfortunately, that's the only thing that you're correct about, because everything else you're 100% wrong about. So let me take you from a novice understanding to a master understanding of the truth. So the rapture is understood to be the final resurrection, the second coming of Jesus Christ, when he will, raise the dead or all of the living, and everybody will meet him up in the air. So I see the entire story behind the veil. The rapture is clear to me, but it's sad that the Christians don't even understand the truth that lies behind the bullshit of the pair of bulls, or the parable. In other words, the bullshit. I mean, did you think that this was my first rodeo? You should have done your research before you came to me and assumed I was wrong. So here is the wisdom, the knowledge, and the logical truth of the very root, which is the foundation of what all of this is talking about. So countless times I have actually proven the fact that the apocalypse and rapture and revelations all are talking about the sun god, Re or Ra. You see, I am going to prove it from all angles, from all perspectives, from all 360 degrees of possibility. I am 100% correct, and I'm going to prove it. So here is the real light of the truth. So the etymological root of rapture comes from the Latin raptura, or the raptus, meaning a seizure, rape, kidnapping, or a carrying off. And of course, this is the same etymology that you showed in your comment, which of course you have no idea why, and you don't understand the etymology and didn't take it far enough. So rapture is a compound word made basically of two different words that are compressed together, and the root, or the parent and triliteral root of the word is rap, or the wrapped. And then the T-U-R-E, or the U-R-E, is basically talking about a process. So the parent root is ra, and then the triliteral root is rap, which means a carrying off, an abduction, a rape, a seizure, or a carrying away. So a rapture is basically the process of carrying off, the act of taking away, an abduction, or a rape. So let's take a look at the aperture etymology, and it comes from the apertus, and it means to open, and the pi root, or the parent root, is ap, off, away, to cover, thus the pi root of op, over, thus like a veil, or the meaning of opening and shutting. And of course, on a camera, which is all about lighting, is the degree of the aperture, or the degree or amount, the strength of the light, and more specifically, the sunlight. So your shallow grasp of understanding this situation is that you don't even realize that the single letter root of R is about the sun. But I'll be getting back to that. Let's focus on the abduction and the carrying off and the raping. So like I've explained, one day is both day and night, which is the microcosm of both winter and summer of 1 year. So to the ancients, every day the sun would rise, and then it would be abducted, carried off, and taken away to the underworld. So of course this is where the concept of aperture comes from, as the sun goes from the largest or the most light down to the little pinhole of no light. So you see, the ancients actually saw the sun as a sowing and a reaping every day. Every day would be sown or birthed, and then every day it would die or be reaped. Just as the sun does in the macrocosm of the year at the end of the season, or the end of the harvest, when the sun dies and goes to the underworld. So you see, you have no idea why rapture is related to rape and being abducted, but it has 100% everything to do with the sun god Ra, or Re, also known as Helios, Apollo, the soul, as well as Shamash and Utu. So you see, the Bible is all about the sower and the reaper. It's all about the sun cycles of the harvest, planting and reaping. Thus, the harvest is the end of the age. It's not the end of the world, not the end of the time or of life. It's the end of the season. Thus, the harvest is the crop for eternal life that repeats, because that's exactly what the sun does. It is the bringer of the fields and the harvest, and of course, the bringer of the reaping of the harvest. So it's all related to the sun 100%. Thus, the ancient grain and harvest rituals that were around thousands of years before the Bible. And of course, one of the most ancient popular myths of the grain and harvest rituals was that of Eleusinian mysteries of Eleusis. The ancient harvest and grain fertility rituals that were all about the harvest goddess Demeter and her daughter Persephone, or Persephone, who was abducted and raped by the god of the underworld, Hades, who came up and seized her and carried her off to the underworld. So the harvest grain goddess Demeter had to go to Helios to ask where she had been taken to, and he told her to the underworld. So, long story short, Persephone spent 6 months in the underworld and 6 months above the world. It was all in relation to the sun and the seasons, the 6 months of winter and 6 months of summer. Again, the story of the sun being born or reborn, living its life, and then going to the underworld. The ancient concept of life, death, and rebirth. You see, the raping or the abduction goes way back into history, before even Persephone or Persephone, Proserpina. It goes back to the ancient abduction of the ancient purple scarlet whore who rode the beast, Europa. And of course, that's why I say Persephone, the Phoenician goddess who rode the beast. Thus, Zeus, who changed into a bull and abducted and raped and took away, carried her off, Europa. You'll notice the abductor is the El Toro, Taurus bull. Thus, as I have proven countless times, that all of the ancient religions, all of the ancient cultures of the world had their bull gods. And of course, they were related to both the lunar bull crescent moon as well as the solar sun. Thus, the Egyptian bull gods, and of course the relationship between the sun god Ra or Horus and the bull. In fact, Europa's name actually means the wide head or the wide face, like a cow. And Europa in the ancient Semitic origin and the Akkadian meant to go down and set, in reference to the sun. And of course, this is the great horror of Revelations, which we'll be getting back to. Then of course we have the famous descent of Inanna to the underworld. Inanna, the great horned bull goddess. So the descent of Inanna to the underworld is where many current-day myths and stories actually come from. Thus, we have the original descent to the underworld and the concept of hell. Thus, the 7 gates of Inanna's descent to the underworld. And of course, the symbol of the torch is the only light that is available in the underworld. Thus, it is a symbol of the descent of the goddess. And of course, we find these stories in the Epic of Gilgamesh that goes back thousands of years before the Bible, and we have all the biblical stories of the flood, the deluge. And of course, they slay the bull in a offering to the sun god Shamash, which was a sun sacrifice. You see, because it's all about the sowing and the reaping, or the raping of the sun. It's abduction and carrying off. And of course, this was just the beginning. Part 2 will seal the deal.
Okay, so now that you understand that the rapture or a rapture is the process of carrying off, the compound word of rap and chur, and now that you understand how it relates to the ancient abduction stories of the sun, which is really the reality of nature, of how the sun appears to be abducted every day and taken away to the underworld. Thus, the raping and the reaping of the sun in relation to harvest and life. So like I said, the rapture is the Ra, the sunlight aperture, meaning the strength and the weakness of the sun throughout the season, the aperture of the light.
An aperture simply refers to an opening.
Thus, a revelation or an unveiling, an opening, the action or the process of the sun being carried off. Because the rapture is about the old year or the old sun dying and being reborn again. Because the rapture is all about the end of the harvest at the end of the year, when all of the reaping and the raping is carried off. And of course, the sowing and the reaping of the harvest is all accomplished and is able to be accomplished by the sun. So now that you understand about the word rapture and how it breaks down, I want to break it down even further to the parent root or even the single letter root. So obviously the Egyptian language was around way before the English language, but the sun god was known as Ra and Re, the R-A and the R-E. But before there was ever an E, there was the A, which came first. So the vowels really don't matter. The very subject matter here really is the letter R. You see, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and of course, the R in Rapture or in Revelations tells a story within itself. A circle is 360 degrees, or the 36 sections of the zodiac. You see, R is the number 18. 18 is the 180 degrees, which is half of a circle, half of the 36, or the 360. And of course, the R is the 18, which is the 666. And of course, the 66 is the 6 and the 6, which is actually related to the sun, because 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. is the setting and the rising of the sun. Thus, the 6x6 magic sun square. And of course, when the clock strikes 6, it becomes the 7th hour. Thus, the hexagram or the sexagram of 6, which of course reveals the number 7, or the septum, in the mid-L. So like I've explained, the 7 or the September is the separation that separates and is a parting of the zodiac dia, the dissection of the zodiac, that is divided by the 7 and the 1, Aries and Libra. Thus the ascending and descending, or the resurrection, the rise and the fall of autumn. So of course, this is the time of winter, the death of the year, the autumn fall equinox, which is the time of judgment, thus the scales of Libra, which comes from the scales of judgment from the Egyptian Ma'at. So you are judged before going to the underworld, which is in September, the time of winter. Thus the scales separate summer and winter, the 6 and the 6, which makes the 12 houses of the zodiac. So of course, this is why the 12 houses of the zodiac has the scales of Libra. And of course, the 12 tribes of Israel, the house of Dan, also has the scales. And of course, why one of Jesus' followers, one of his 12 disciples, also has the scales. Matthew, who is Ma'at. Which of course is why Matthew is about the judgment. And wouldn't you know it, the book of Revelations also has the character who holds the scales. Because the 4 horses represent the 4 seasons, which is just like the 4 archangels or the angles of the zodiac. And of course the Horus is the horse. Thus, Helios was carried by 4 horses, exactly like the 4 horses of Hades. Because the 4 and the 4 is the normal dissection cutting of the wheel of the year. So the book of Revelation is all about the sun, the revelation, or the revealing of the veil, the unveiling, the covering and the uncovering. So through etymology and symbolism and just esoteric wisdom alone, this one picture here alone reveals the entire story. So let's break down the R even further and take it back to its roots of Paleo-Hebrew, the Cana-Phoenician R, or the Resh. And again, you'll notice the Re, or the R-E, the Ra in Arabic. Thus, the very letter R, the Resh, is the Ra, or the Re, which is the paleopictograph of a head. You see, the R marks the new year in September of Libra, the autumn equinox. Thus, the Rosh Hashanah. Thus, the letter R is the Ra, is the Re, is the redhead of Rosh. Thus, the autumn equinox of fall in September of Libra, the scales, is Rosh Hashanah, the day of judgment, because this is the time to go into the underworld of winter, the rapture or the rape of nature. So the R, or the Resh, is just like the Rot, or the Roth, which means red, like the Rothschilds. Thus, the Mutan of the lamb and the ram, and the red, bloody shield of the Passover. So, like I've explained, the Re is a word and is also a prefix that means the repetition, back, or again. It means to repeat and do again, thus giving us words like rebirth, reborn, redo, remade, revolve, etc. So you clearly stated that the Ra in the word rapture does not derive from the Egyptian sun god Ra or Re. But you're sadly mistaken, because the root and the source of Re or Ra comes from the Egyptian sun god Ra or Re. And this is the original source, dating back almost 5,000 years. And it's just like when I explained that the word English with the E actually comes from the English with an A, which is the same story with Re or Ra, because when you look up Re, R-E, it'll tell you that it comes from the sun god Ra. And when you do your research on the word Re or Ra, you'll find that the only words that pertain to the action or the process of doing over, repeating, and rebirthing is the sun god Ra or Re. No other words have anything to do with repeating and rebirthing. So all you have to do is use your logic and think about it. Go back thousands of years before anything was created. Go back to nature. Go back to reality. And you'll find that there is nothing that is rebirthed or repeats itself over and over again other than the sun, as well as the moon, which I'll get to a little bit later. But the sun is reborn, lives its life, and then dies every day. This is an ancient fact that all of mankind has known about for thousands of years. So the Re or the Ra of the sun god, and the use in our language today, is the exact same meaning that it has had for thousands of years. It is all about the sun god that is the eternal life for all of mankind, and all life on earth for that matter. So since ancient times, the sun has gone to the underworld and died, and then is reborn and recycled and repeats over and over every day, every year. The life, death, and rebirth of God's Son. And of course, the ancient Egyptians were all about the resurrection and the rebirth of their sun god, Ra, or Horus. So these resurrection stories were around thousands of years before the Bible was ever created. And of course, that's why the Bible plagiarized and has the story of the resurrection of Jesus, or Yeshua. And of course, Osiris was the vegetation god of the harvest, thus he died annually. And of course, he was the god of the dead and the underworld. And that's exactly why Jesus is the firstborn of the dead. And he was born in a manger or a stable, because that is an animal house of the zodiac wheel. And of course, this is why Jesus, or Jesus, is born upon the autumn and spring equinox, the 7 and the 1, exactly like the Egyptian Atum and Amun Ra. Since ancient times, both the sun and the moon have been depicted as an anthropomorphic character, which is why we have the saying of the man and the moon. So anyway, the sun and the moon have always been viewed as eyes of God. In fact, this is why the god Odin has the 2 eyes of the sun and the moon, exactly like Ra or Horus. And we have the ancient stories of the one eye being poked out, like the ancient story of Set, the god of chaos, who pokes out the left eye or the moon of Horus. Thus, the illuminated one eye of Ra. So many people will use either the left or the right eye, and most people probably don't even know the difference, but, the left-hand path and the right-hand path. But anyway, let's take a look at the very glyph of the sun god Ra's eye. When you take a look at our modern-day English language and the letter R, you'll notice that it basically has the same symbolic glyph pictograph of the Eye of Ra, which of course we also see in the registered trademark. So this is why the Illuminati has their headquarters located 13 blocks north of the White House, the House of Baal. We have the Supreme Council, or the headquarters of the Freemasonic Order in America, which of course is located between the streets of R and S, which is Resh, which is the head. So you pronounce the Hebrew R as Resh, because Re is the light ray. Thus the sun god was known as Re. Even though it's spelled as Ra or R-E, it's still pronounced as Re. So you see, that's why when you read the Bible, like in Isaiah 44:6, where it says, I am the first, God is actually saying, if you look it up in Hebrew too, you can confirm this. I am the head. I am the Reshon. The Resh plus On, which of course was the city of the sun, where they worshipped the sun god Helios. Which is why today we still turn our lights on. You see, 2,500 years before the God of the Bible claimed, I am the first, we have Atum Ra, who claimed, I am the first and the last. And of course, Atum Ra gives us our current word called autumn, which is the fall. Thus, the Rosh Hashanah, the new year, or the R, the 1/2 of the year, is over and begins. In fact, the numerical value of Resh is 200, which is in the middle. So, of course, you'll notice that the Hebrew Resh is just like our modern-day R, of course, inverted, and it's pointed over to the September
autumn equinox, the Resh, the R, the head or the beginning, which is exactly why the Bible has the words Berashit, which is all about the house of Resh, or the Re of Ra. And of course, this repeating, recycling, rebirthing of the sun is why we have the prefix of Re, which means back to the original place, again. So this is part 3, and I suggest that you go back and watch parts 1 and 2 so that you can catch up to where we are at this point. So before I continue, I do want to reiterate the fact that thousands of years before the Bible was written, that the scales of weighing of the souls was performed in ancient Egypt, or Kemet. Thus, the goddess Ma'at, who was the goddess of truth and justice. And of course, this was the weighing of the souls before they go to the underworld, or the afterlife. Actually, we can find the scales on the ancient depiction of the Egyptian zodiac, which of course marks the fall, or the autumn equinox, when the Son of God goes to the underworld during the 6 months of winter. So the ancient scales of Ma'at today is known as the House of Libra on the zodiac. So of course, this is exactly why we find the symbolism of the scales throughout the biblical story, which is a story of the seasons, or the cycle of the sun. So you see, long before the Son of God, Jesus or Yeshua, was known as the Truth, with his heart symbolism, thousands of years before, there was the goddess of truth, Ma'at, who was connected with the Son of God, Ra, who actually helped chart his daily course across the heavens, into the underworld and back again. And of course, there were 12 judges, which represented the 12 months. So this is why the Bible has one of the 12 disciples who is the testimony of Jesus. And like I explained, Matthew is actually Ma'at. And like I said, the 7 and the 1 divide the year of Libra, or Ma'at, which is why Matthew 7:1 is talking about judgment. And of course, once again, we find the scales in the 12 houses of Jacob, or the 12 tribes of Israel. So now when we come to the book of Revelations in the Bible, like I said, the book of Revelations is all about the sun god Re. And of course, this is exactly why Revelation 12 is all about the woman who is clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars. Isn't that just a cute little quinky-dink? So for those that are blind and ignorant to the story, they even repeat it once again and tell you about the horseman of Revelations who carries the scales of judgment to the underworld. And of course, once again, the Bible shows us the same symbolism again of the scales when we look at the archangel, or the angle of the sun angel, Michael, who is the one who weighs the souls. How original. So of course, that's why today we have the 12 hours on our clock. And like I've explained, the hour is related to Horus. And of course, the horse, which was the solar deity who rode the sun chariot that was led by the horse. And like I explained earlier, the 12 houses of the months of the year of the wheel is actually divided into the 8 sections of the wheel of the year, which of course gives us our symbol of the hourglass, which is the symbol of 8, consuming time, like Saturnale. And like I've explained, that's why Santa, at the end of the year, or the end of the season of time, he has the 8 reindeer. And by the way, the sun god Ra was born from the Nu, which was the watery abyss, which is exactly why we have the story of the horse that was created from the waters. So the sun god rode the 4 horses during the summer season, and then of course during the winter season the 4 horses were ridden
by Hades, the god of the winter death of hell, the one of the rapture and the raping and the carrying off of our sun. Now, Baal was actually the ancient sun god who was the son of El, the Most High. So the seasonal cycle of the sun was known as the Baal cycle, that was around thousands of years before the Bible. So actually this is the meaning of a scale. And of course, the scale itself is a balance. Thus, the scale actually comes from the word to cut or divide, because we're talking about the division of summer and winter, the Baal cycle of the balance. Ance is the state of being, and Baal is the sun. Thus, the symbolism of the scales of the season that divide the year. So that's why we find so much symbolism of the scales in the Bible, because the biblical story of the Bible is all about the division or the divide. And of course I have proven this beyond a reasonable doubt. So like I said, the cutting or the dividing of the balance is the division or the divide of the Bible, like the zodiac wheel, the zodiah, meaning the animal flesh that is cut in two, which is the entire same story that we find in the Bible of the Ark of the Covenant, which of course means to cut a covenant or to cut the meat in two, the division of the divide. And of course this is why El in the Bible says that he sits in between or the mid-El of the cherubim, which is the angels or the angles. So I've explained that El, or the Taurus bull, like the bulls that were worshipped in ancient Egypt, and by the Israelites, the ancient Egyptians also worshipped the ram, Amun-Ra. And of course the Krios is Greek for the ram, or the lamb, which is exactly why in Christianity, the Hebrew religion, we have the Son of God, who is known as the Lamb of God. Now, I've proven this countless times, and you can look it up for yourself, but the ancient bull worship moved to the ram worship, which is exactly why when you look up the word God in the Bible, you will find that it comes from the ancient word Elohim. And by the way, I encourage you to go ahead and look up the Hebrew lexicon of the word God in the Bible, and you will come to Elohim, Eloah, and El. Ayil. And you can read it right there. It is the horned ram of the pillar god of Ares, the red bloody god of war. And of course that's why Satanism, or the neo-pagans, what have you, will also worship the ram god, worshipping the ram god like they have done for thousands of years, because the ram is one of the animals of the zoo or the zodiac. You see, because thousands of years ago our ancient ancestors always combined the element of nature and animals with the spiritual world, thus of the religion of God. So that's why they combined these two elements together, forming today what we call anthropomorphism. In fact, this is exactly why this ancient practice is still practiced today, and that's why we put faces on both the sun and the moon, that we anthropomorphize with human characteristics. So since ancient times, mankind has always anthropomorphized the character of God. And that's exactly why God was created in the image of man, and not the other way around. The man-made deity of the Bible, where we find the symbol of the cross. A cross is a crossing of two, which of course is the ancient symbol for God and the modern-day symbol of the God of the Bible. So the truth is, the symbol of the cross goes back thousands of years before mankind ever created the Bible. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, which is exactly why this symbol still holds its original meaning. The cross that is formed on the wheel of the year of the two, the crossing of the solstice
and the equal of the equinox. And of course, this is why the whole Hebrew faith and Christianity is all surrounded and encompassed by following the seasonal patterns of the sun and the moon. And the new year begins with the Bereshit in the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, the new year of the Re of Ra descending to the underworld. Which of course this brings us back to the recycling of the sun god Re. So you see, it's my many years of research and covering all of the angles as to why I can assert with certainty that Re, the prefix, is from Re, the ancient sun god. You see, the truth is Re has been a prefix and even a suffix that has been added to words for thousands of years. Thus, Amun Ra and Ra Horati. Now, I did all of my own research to come to my assertions and my wisdom and understanding of this whole concept. But just the other day, I did find that there's an author from over 100 years ago that came to the same conclusions I did, obviously, where he states that the prefix Re comes from the ancient sun god Re. So let's take a look at some words that begin with Re and see if they are related to the sun god Re. So we all know that the light is the enlightenment from darkness. Thus we realize that the darkness is evilness and the light is goodness, which is why we need to be bright in order to have enlightenment. Thus, the light of God. You see, since ancient times, the deity was always related to the light. Thus, anything to do with light, like the diamond, for example, the bright light was related to the element of God. The deity, which was seen in elements like water and jewels, as well as the sacred fluids of the anointing oils, or the waters, or the cream. So it's the light of El, which is why we have the element of electricity that lights our bulbs. So the truth is, mankind has always worshipped the light because the light took us from darkness, obviously. Thus, it was always a symbol of the light or the enlightenment from God. The light of the sun and the moon is what gives us eternal life here on earth and enables us to see and live. So like I said, this is why all the ancient gods were worshipped for the elements of the light that came from Re, the sun god, which is exactly why today we have what is known as the religion, the legions of the sun god Re. And that's why the ancient light rays of Re gives us our word today, known as a light ray. And this light ray comes from the radiation from the sun. So of course, this is why the God of the Bible is related to the fire or the light. And of course, his son, Jesus, is also related to the light and or the thunder and lightning. Which brings us to the revelations of Re, which is known as the apocalypse or the Apollo sun eclipse. And of course, this is why we find the story of the eclipse in the book of Revelations. And of course, that's why they even show us in the movie Apocalypto, they show us the eclipsing sun and moon, which is a symbol of the elite using the ignorance of the people against themselves. Which is why Apocalypto is all about the sun sacrifice, which was all about taking out the heart of the victim, which is why we have the heart symbolism related to Jesus and, of course, Ma'at. You see, the truth is, Apocalypto is actually showing people the origins of Christianity and where this blood sacrifice ritual of the Son of God came from. The same ancient story of the sun sacrifice. So for thousands of years, they have always had the element of the blood offering in their ancient sacrifices to the sun god, who would favor their crops for the next year. So the blood offering is a sin offering that saves the rest of the people, and the harvest for the next year. Thus, the warrior and the willing sacrifice. Then he places the heart of the sacrifice victim on a scale. Then he places the heart of the sacrifice victim on a scale. Because these are the scales of justice, the weighing of the heart before they depart and descend to the underworld. Thus the Resh, thus the head of the year, or Rosh Hashanah, the decapitation of the old year to the new year. So if you've watched my videos over the years, you know that I've explained all about the ancient ritual of the decapitating or the beheading. And like I explained, the Rosh Hashanah, or the R, is the head of the year, which is why that's when we decapitate, which is in September, which is exactly why we have all these ancient rituals of the beheading or the decapitation. And as I've explained many times in my videos, the decapitating of the head, like the serpent stories that we find or the dragon slayer films, it's always about decapitating the head off. Just like when we watch in Alice in Wonderland, when she decapitates the serpent dragon's head off. And of course that's why the queen is always saying, "Off with his head." And that's why when the season changes, we watch the crown go from one queen or one season to the other. You see, the dragon or the serpent is an ancient symbol of the primordial goddess. That's why all of the ancient symbolism from ancient Egypt even, you'll find that Isis and Osiris, they were serpents. You will find that the fiery sun god Ra is encased in a circling cobra serpent. Thus, the Cobra. So like I've explained, the sun serpent dragon aspect is the primordial, spirit or nature. So therefore it must be slain so that the new one can be reborn again. So the serpent symbolism is the fertility aspect of the sun. And of course this is why we have the serpent Apep in ancient Egypt that the sun god Ra had to face every night along his journey. So of course in the film Apocalypto we see the beheading or the decapitation. So the Egyptian as well as the Mayan pyramids were aligned according to the solstices as well as the equinoxes, which of course was all about the sun and moon worship. So we find that the Mayans and the Aztecs, they worshipped the serpent aspect or the dragon aspect of the sun. Thus, Quetzalcoatl or Kukulkan, as I proved many years ago, is actually the feathered serpent, the plumed serpent. And of course the plume is the plumage that we find around the eclipsing sun. And that's exactly why it's called the Kulklos. So perhaps now you'll understand a little bit more of the truth behind the Arab Spring and the Isis ritual of the beheading or the decapitations, which of course almost always happen in the separation of September.
So like I've explained, the serpent is the fertility aspect or symbol of the sun. So the sun god was created by the serpent energy of the mother goddess. So before it was worshipped as a male deity, it was worshipped as an ancient goddess deity. So of course that's why even in the Bible today, you have once again the symbolism of the ancient serpent goddess and the serpent snake that is related to the goddess in the creation story of Genesis, or the Gene of Isis, in the Bible. So of course this is why we have the Leviathan in the Bible and the bull, and of course it is all about the slaying of the serpent primordial goddess from the underworld. So that's why the Bible has the serpents and the dragons, like in the book of Revelations. And of course, where Moses lifts the serpent on the staff, which is exactly like the Son of Man, which of course is all in reference to the fiery eye or son of Re or Ra, which is why the book of Revelations is all about the red fiery eye of Re. And of course this is why God appears as fire in the Bible. Thus, the fiery serpent that Moses lifted up, which in Hebrew is the seraph, the serpent, the burning serpent, or the fiery sun serpent. The Hebrew seraph is the serpent of bronze, thus the flaming serpent of the bronze glowing furnace that we find in the book of Revelations. Thus the fiery, brazen, bronze, golden bull, the ancient solar calf, or the Son of God. So this is why we have the story of the Bible, the serpent, and the Son of Man, Jesus. So the ancient Son of God, Baal, the bull god, was of course the seasonal harvest lord, the sun lord of death and resurrection. And here we see Baal holding the serpent with the fire. So this is why we have Zeus, the bull god, and you'll notice right here to his right is his serpent. So this is why Apollo, the sun god, slays the python. And of course, the symbolism of the serpent and the bull is with Apollo. So like I've said, the serpent on the pole is just the symbol of the sun throughout the seasons. And this is exactly why this eternal life and rebirthing and resurrection is an ancient symbol of the sun. This is why we have that symbol on the medical field of the caduceus, which is the symbol of the serpents going up the pole. Thus, it is the serpent energy of the winter-summer, day and night energy of the polar opposites of the male and the female, of the positive and negative of nature. So this is why it's really funny actually to see the people freak out and actually believe that there are, this evil presence of satanic serpents or something, when they just completely misunderstand this ancient symbol of the fertility of the goddess before the goddess was demonized by the male patriarchy worship that took over the ancient worship of the matriarchy worship of the goddess. So, that's why we have Medusa, for example. Medusa is the serpent evil goddess, the demon goddess, but the truth is, the Medusa head represents the head of the sun, thus it is decapitated. Like I said, the Medusa is the caduceus. Remember the poisonous, fiery eyes of Medusa? Then, of course, we have the decapitation.
Find and fulfill your destiny.
Fulfilling the destiny of the traveling fool, like the sun god Ra or Re on his path across the solar skies. On his boat, the traveling fool, just like the story of the Odyssey, the fools on the traveling boat, just like Jesus, the traveling fool on the boat. Then, in the pagan Norse mythology, we have Odin with his sacred serpents. He sits on a throne that actually has the serpent dragons on it. And of course, in the middle of the garden, they have their sacred tree, which of course is also where Odin is sacrificed. And of course, he is pierced in the side. And of course, we have the one-eye symbolism of Odin. One eye was the sun and one eye was the moon. And of course, he rode an 8-legged horse. So the Norse mythology has the red and the blue, winter and summer, hell and heaven. And of course, they have the creator bull cow goddess. And of course, they have the Trinity, and they slay the primeval beast from the abyss. Then, of course, they have Ragnarok, which is the destruction, the end of the world, the end times. The rapture, which is why we have the Ra in Ragnarok. And of course, the end times have to do with serpents and dragons, and of course, the destruction of the sun and the moon. And of course, the roosters crow instead of the horns blowing. And like I've explained before, the rooster or the chicken is a symbol of the sun, because when the sun rises, the chicken rooster crows. And of course, they're a symbol of fertility, which is why they're called a cock. When the morning sun rises, that's when men also rise. And of course, that's why roosters say cock-a-doodle-doo. So like I said, the chicken is related to the fertility and the sun, which is of course why we have our eggs called sunny side up. And of course, once again, the yolk has to do with the fertility of the bull or the calf of the golden sun. The Bible bullshit, which is why the yoke is on you. And obviously, since ancient times, the egg is a symbol of fertility, which is why on Easter we have the symbol of the chicken egg, because it represents the fertility of the sun rising in the east. So now you'll understand why they have Chicken Little and the story of the sky is falling. It's the end of the world.
Ragnarok has many different names, and all of them have a wide variety of different meanings and translations. Before Ragnarok began, there were several foreseen events. Sol the sun would bear a daughter just as beautiful as her before being consumed by Skoll. After Ragnarok, the daughter would continue in her mother's path. 3 roosters would crow, raising and alerting all the warriors for the final battle.
So we find that the Norse mythology is just like the Judaic mythology as well as the Mayan mythology of the end having to do with the sun and the moon. You see, it's always been about the final battle, because man realized long time ago that everything died and came to an end. Every day and night the sun appeared to die and go to the underworld and then was reborn again, just like every year, and exactly like the human life or all life on earth. You see, all life upon earth will eventually die. It is mortal, which is why we created God to be immortal. In fact, humans today still cannot grasp the concept of something not ending, which is why we still believe today that there is a universe. And of course, this is the concept of Norse mythology as well, which is exactly like the Aztec and Mayan concepts. Their version of the world axis, or the center of the world, which lies in the mid-El, or the Midgard. And what lies in the mid-El is the middle of Earth, or our known world. It is the tree of life, or the tree of knowledge. Adam knew Eve, and they conceived. So the sacred tree in the midst of the garden
is an ancient concept throughout the world. So the sacred tree has been worshipped for thousands of years before the Bible. So the tree symbolized the fertility of life. And actually in the Norse mythology, the tree within the garden actually is a story also about the golden apples, which of course represents the fertility of the sun, which is why an apple is actually named after Apollo, the sun god. So this is exactly why, even to this very day, that mankind still brings in the ancient sacred fertility tree. So, people have it all wrong about the Garden of Eden, the tree, the creation story, the serpent and Adam and Eve, and the apple, of course, which is, the very image that I use on my avatar, because people are completely, misguided and have been told lies about the true meaning behind the apple from the Garden of Eden, the fruit of God, and what it represents. So in the next part 5, I will be completely going over this story and explaining it so that everyone knows the truth behind the apple of Adam and Eve. So now that you understand that thousands of years before the Bible was written, there was always the sacred tree of life. Actually, it was the sacred tree of life and death. Thus, the sacred tree represented both the female aspect as well as the male aspect. So, of course, this is why the tree is used as the sacrificial symbol. And, of course, what makes the tree grow, besides water, is the sun. So this is why God placed the 2 cherubim in the east of the garden, because in the east is where the sun rises. So, like I explained, the sun is the sower and the reaper of the seasons of the harvest, which of course brings us the fruits of our labors. You see, the fruit, let's say like an apple, is actually the seed or the offspring child of the mother-father tree. Thus, fruits symbolize the fertility of nature. So that's why the Bible says, be fruitful and multiply, meaning have lots of sex and offspring. You see, this is why the Bible says, Adam knew Eve, and she conceived. He knew her. He knows her, because the word know or knowledge means sex. And by the way, that's why the symbol for sex is the symbol of Re or Ra, the sun god. Thus, the fertility of the knowledge in the mid-El, we find in the Kabbalah the same exact symbolism. The knowledge, or the Da'at, is in the mid-El. It's the one that's not talked about, the El even, which is actually a symbol of sex. Exactly like King Solomon's temple. So now that you understand that the tree of knowledge is actually the tree of sex, and thus the fruit represents the fertility of sex, then I want to explain a little bit further about the fruit itself, because many people argue, is it a fig, is it a pomegranate, or is it an apple, etc. You see, everyone's missing all the symbolism here. It's about the fruit itself and what it represents, and why the apple was chosen. So the very shape of the apple itself is embedded with esoteric symbolism. It is in the shape of the sacred torus, which I have explained in previous videos. But I want to get back to the apple itself. So like I explained, the apple is a symbol of the sun, the red apple, and thus it is a torus shape, which is the shape of the symbol of Re or Ra. Thus the apple is the symbol of the sun, and why I said that apple is named after Apollo, the sun god. You see, the apple is the Ap-El. Av, or Ab, is the father. But you see, it is the aspect of the water that is the whole subject here. So the Ap came from Ab. Now the Sumerian Ab was the waters. Thus it also represented the semen. And thus the Abzu, and the Zu was to know. So I've explained this before, but the thunder and lightning and rain was, obviously a time of replenishing the earth. So the deep thunder sounded like God, etc. But the rain itself represented the impregnating of Mother Earth. Thus the rain, or the water, represented the semen of God. And of course we all know that the rain comes and is created by the sun. Now I don't want to spend too much time on this, but just think about the very words that I've been teaching you, and now you'll have a little deeper insight on the very words that begin with the A and the P. The ap, like aperture, or apep, or the apis bull. And of course, this is why we have the Ra in rain. So in the ancient Sumerian myths, where the Bible plagiarized from, we have the waters that mingle with the waters, which meant sex. So we are all born and birthed from the waters of the goddess, which is her primary element. But also, the male has his waters or his fluids that he mingles with her waters. So in the real world, what happens when we bite into fruit? We experience the wet and refreshing, juicy juice. So you see, that's why God says, be fruitful and replenish the earth. Because he's talking about the fruits and the juice that is the symbol within the fruit. So like I've explained before, the juicy fruit represents the fruit of the goddess, thus the wet aspect of the juicy fruit. And of course, the very looks and appearance of these fruits are another symbol to their esoteric meaning. What do you think the apple and the eye means? The eye is the symbol of the goddess. So I've explained this in past videos so many times, but I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the fact remains that the eye is the symbolism of the Illuminati, of course, the one eye. It all has to do with the fertility and sex magic. And of course, this is all the truth behind the symbolism of the burning bush in the biblical story. So you see, there is much more symbolism involved in the very symbol of the apple, which, like I stated before, is showing you the esoteric energy flow of the Taurus, which can also be seen in the Vesica Pisces. So you see, all of this esoteric wisdom and the knowledge of the Bible, or the knowing of, or the gnosis, is all about the fertility and the ritualistic aspect of the male and the female sexual union, the two forces that oppose and attract. And that's what's wonderful about etymology, because I can prove this in so many different ways, it's unbelievable. So of course they demonize the goddess, therefore they demonize the very apple, which is why they demonize and say that sex is a sin. Through symbolism and the etymology of words, we find and come to the root meaning of truth. So this is why you can use the etymology of, let's say, the AP, which means water, like an apple, and you'll discover that, yes, once again, you look at the word April, and what is April known for? April showers, which is the month of the Fool, the month of Taurus, the bull. So plain and simple, the ancient fiery fertility of the sun and the serpent are connected throughout history for thousands of years. They are symbols of the fertility of nature and life itself. So in real life, serpents are not evil. These are ancient depictions of the fertility of nature. So it's only in the minds of humans that actually believe that a serpent, that God made, by the way, is evil. The serpent is just another animal amongst the kingdom of animals that God made. So the truth is, it's all about your perception of what you think a serpent is. But most people haven't done their complete research on all the aspects or all the angles and understand completely what it symbolizes. Because most people's perception of the serpent is based on outside external forces. So the truth is, they actually inverted the very meaning of this symbolism. Because the truth behind the old phallic serpent and the goddess has to do 100% with sex. So this is exactly why we have nasty Nicki Minaj playing the role of Eve in the Sir Mix-a-Lot's remix with the song called Anaconda, which is all about the Garden of Eden and the Garden of eating the freshy, fleshy fruit of the sacred goddess with her phallic anaconda. By the way, the apple is also demonized in the very word of malice, which really is just the mother, like in the word banana, the musa. The mu is the mu of the bull goddess or the cow. Yeah, I'm sure you remember the stories of Musa or Moses and the water. So the plain simple fact is, in the real world, serpents are up in trees naturally, because that's the way God made it. And they come from the underworld, and the phallic symbol of the serpent itself, like the phallic penis of the male, coming out of the earth and the whole of the underworld, is all the symbolic truth, and how the serpent is rebirthed and reborn again when it shed its skin. It's all very simplistic, yet they use the ignorance of the people against themselves. So that's why, I just seriously laugh my ass off when I hear all of these people talking about, oh, the Illuminati, the reptilian agenda, the reptile eye. It's just the reptile agenda is the reptile age, which is the ancient age of the goddess of the fertility serpent aspect of nature. So that's why they show you the symbol of the eye, which is the Vesica Piscis or Pisces, which is the fish of the goddess, which is her vagina, her sacred eye, her birth canal of life, which is also the eye of the one-eyed monster or the phallic fertility of the serpent penis. So ask yourself, which is more true, that God produced some serpent that is some evil demon thing in this world and is attacking people's minds and blah, 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 blah. Come on. It's a simple ancient symbol of the fertility of nature and of how ancient man perceived nature.
Oh my God. Did you know that geckos are evil because they have the serpent eyes?
It really amazes me how people can be so intelligent yet so ignorant from, getting so close to the truth yet are so far from it. So all you have to do is use the brain that God gave you and you'll realize what a reptile is, the ray, the sun. Because a reptile is a cold-blooded creature that needs to regulate its level of energy within its body by the sun. So you see, that's why when you leave the fake world behind of the man-made fallacies of this world and the Matrix, and you step into the real world and look around, there is no evil serpents, there's no demonic forces, and there's no little, angels floating around. That's just not how God designed our earth or our world. Those are ancient concepts. So all of our current day mythology comes from the basic element of nature and what we observed since day one. And the truth is right before our eyes. That's why you see the fiery fertility of the sun in the dragon, like I said, the Re, the Ra, just like in the word reptile or raptor. You see, all of this ancient wisdom and truth is all before your eyes. It's for you to grasp and to understand, but it's up to you as to whether you accept it or not, or if you want to believe the fantasy story. It's really sad to see all these people doing all this research and they really don't grasp the, the basic level of understanding of what it all means. So you can do your research, but you have to grasp and understand and open your mind. So that's why there's Christians out there just so confused when they see like the Apple logo, for example, of the computers. And the first one sold for 666, the number of the beast. Well, we'll get to that later, but basically a computer means coming together. Yes, the same word as come. It has to do with the fertility of the male and the female, or the ones and the zeros. And in order to turn her on, or turn the computer on, you're going to need to perform the action of sex, or going in and out, which is why you push on the button. And the button symbol is the act of the male and the female inserting. So in order to give it life, we have to come together and perform the act of sex magic. So etymology will always lead us to truth. So you see, this is exactly why the story of John of Patmos, the Patmos Island, it was the sunken island, the sunken island, because Apollo convinced Zeus to raise the island from the bottom of the sea, and thus the sun dried up the land and brought life to it. The primordial mound of the watery abyss. So yes, Patmos has to do with the sun god Re or Ra. So you see, that's why the sun and the moon and the stars are for signs and for seasons and for days and for the time, the seasons. So the solar cycles and the moon cycles are all about the book of Revelations. You just have to have the eyes to see, because it's all about the apocalypse or the revelation of the sun. And that's why the book of Revelations continually talks about the sun. So go read the book of Revelations again, the 22 chapters, and you'll find just how many times the sun is mentioned. And that's why when the rapture comes or the revelation comes, you're gonna go up and meet Jesus in the sky, because that's where the sun is. So now you understand why they're trying to save your soul, which they say is your salvation. Yeah, the sal of the sun, the soul. Thus, they want you to repent. Go up and meet Jesus in the sky, because that's where the sun is. So now you understand why they're trying to save your soul, which they say is your salvation. Yeah, the sal of the sun, the soul. Thus, they want you to repent. Thus, you must redeem yourself through redemption. So, Little White Rabbit, you see the problem is that you have your face shoved into what you're trying to grasp and understand. You need to take some steps back so that you can examine and overview and grasp the entire painting. You see, because the story that has been painted is all about the cycles of the seasons. So you see, you are just not able to grasp and relate to what I'm saying. And that's exactly why you don't realize, and therefore you are not able to retain and receive the wisdom. Now use your memory and remember that the stars, the sun, and the moon are for seasons, and for cycles, and for signs, and for the times. So the dualistic deity of the Bible has the god, like I said earlier, that is the ram god, the Ayil, which of course is why God's son is also related to the lamb, or the ram, and that's exactly why the very word ram has the Ra in it. I've explained before, the Ayil is, the pillars, the red pillars of the blood red, which is why the color red has Re in it. Just like the color of the biblical red heifer. And of course that's why they want you to drink the red bull of El, or the bull's blood, Red Bull.
And here we have something else. Not just a symbol, but a sound. A sign indicating the sun. In Coptic, Re, but also known as the god Ra, which gives us Ra-ma-sis, Ramesses, an ancient Egyptian and not a Greek pharaonic name.
Surely this is guesswork, not science. The ancient hieroglyphs are silent.
There was another cartouche at Abyssinian. We have the M and the S. But what is this bird? To me, it looks like the Egyptian ibis. A bird associated with which god?
Thoth.
Exactly, Professor Sassy. Another symbolic hieroglyph, that also provides us with a sound, the sound that you have so eloquently pronounced. Put these sounds together, and we have Thosmosis. Thosmosis. The name of pharaohs who ruled 1,500 years before Alexander the Great conquered Egypt.
Comfort to the church, Professor Cersei. I've heard enough to know that this man has the power to undermine all of us. He must be stopped.
So the wisdom of the sun predates the very names that we have ever given the sun. Re, Ra, Utu, Shamash, whatever you want to call the sun. And if you understand the sun and its cycles and how it operates, then you would understand everything in the Bible. So all you have to do is look around in nature and realize that what is the only thing that is rebirthed from the horizon and is risen and born every day and then dies and is taken off and abducted and carried off into the underworld and then is resurrected and reborn from that death of the night and is brought back again. It is recycled. What else in nature has this very essence of this concept to it? The sun does. So I want to explain something to you. This is why I lay out the zodiac like a clock is. So the hours that go through the day is just like the sun going through the houses of the zodiac throughout the year. So on the equinox of spring, or Aries, would be 3 p.m., the third month. And of course, the 7th month would be the fall, or the underworld time of 9 o'clock. aka September. So this is the fall equinox, or the autumnal equinox of the winter time. Thus we find the raping, the reaping, and of course the woman who is dressed in the sun. And of course the serpents or the dragons are all really just talking about the serpents and the dragons that are found in the ancient depictions of the constellations. So real quickly I want to explain something to you, that when the sun is in the constellation or that house, you really can't see it because the sun is blocking it out. In order to view a constellation, you have to look to the opposite side or the anti-side of the zodiac wheel. So for example, if you want to view the house of Aries, you would look to the anti or opposite side of the zodiac wheel in autumn. So when the book of Revelations was talking about the woman who is clothed with the sun, they're telling you that because it's a sign of the season, which happens to be the 7th month, or our 9th month today, known as September. You see, this is the time when God's sun is in the house of Virgo, the Virgin. And of course, this is why she has the sun within her. She is pregnant with the sun. And of course, in the month of September, the moon will also come to be at the feet or the foot base of the woman. So the Bible in the book of Revelation is just taking you through the houses of the zodiac, the 12 houses that the Son of God goes through throughout the year. So you'll notice that the house of the Virgin in Virgo is the lady, as well as the lady of Libra. So you'll notice that the Virgo Virgin Goddess holds the last sheaf. She is the grain or the corn fertility goddess. So she is the mother agricultural harvest grain mother. Thus, she is Demeter and the legend of Persephone, which of course is just the raping and the reaping of God's Son during the harvest season, as it's taken for 6 months to the underworld. So you see, you have the Mother Mary of March in the spring equinox, and the autumn equinox is the Virgin Goddess and Libra. So of course in September, or in the fall of autumn, which is the 9, of course, that's why in Revelations 9 we find
I saw a star fall from heaven, because it is the season or the angle of fall. Thus, the number 9. And here's some wisdom for you. You know, people all the time are always talking about Labor Day. When does Labor Day come? During the month of September, the 9th month, the first moon's day of September. Because Labor Day is all about the mother goddess who is impregnated for 9 months. So of course that's why there's a debate about Jesus being born in the spring or the autumn equinox. So in the tarot deck, for example, it starts off with the Fool, the 0, which is actually the first card. And then on card 21, which is card 22 actually, is the World. That's when we become of age, by the way. And of course, it's the symbol of the goddess Yoni. And you'll notice the 4 creatures in the corner as well. Of course, these are the 4 animals that we find in the Bible of the angel, which is actually the Shedu. It is the Lamassu, the cherubim. It is the Shenu, or the cycle seasons of the animals that go through the houses of the zodiac, which is exactly why these 4 attributes are the 4 characteristics that are found in the 4 animals that form the cross on the zodiac. So I have explained that the Sunday is the 7th day of the week, and of course the 7 itself is over 700 times mentioned in the Bible, and of course the book of Revelations, and on, because the number 7 is the sacred number 7 of the 7 heavenly Elohim, or the 7 wandering stars, which of course is the 7 candlesticks, the 7 flames, which of course is the 7 planets or the 7 wandering stars on the menorah. And of course the menorah has the word Ra in it, both the moon and the sun. Thus, the menorah is represented by the 7 or the 9. So now that you understand more of the deeper hidden esoteric truths of Re or Ra, and how it relates to, of course, all of the religions of the world, and of course the book of Revelation and Apocalypse and so forth, I want to continue and expose and explain a few more words. So understanding the very fundamentals of Re and Ra is why you can now understand why the word return has Re in it. And then of course we have Re, born or rebirthed, because the entire process of Re is about revolving. Thus the recycle, which of course is making a revelation or a revolution. Thus the Ouroboros, or the Cirque-L, which of course is round. Which is why other Resh words that begin with R, as in the R-O or even the R-I, are all to do with Re, the sun god. So words like rotate, which is talking about the rotation and going around and repeating. The words are endless, like the red rose. So yes, the Re prefix does come from Re, the sun god. Thus, you can try to make or remake whatever story you want, but the truth is the truth. And of course, what is the word for truth in Hebrew? It is the AMT, Amat, which is Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. So you see, the truth is, Mr. Little White Rabbit, the white rabbit is the symbol of reproduction, because they reproduce. So of course that's why the rabbit is a symbol of Easter or springtime, because of their fertility, which is exactly why Playboy has the bunny, because those are the little F bunnies. And of course that's why we have the fertility of Ra in rabbit. And by the way, that's why a rabbit is known as a coney. The coney is the cunny, which is the cunt. It has to do with the woman vagina. And that's exactly why the rabbit all has to do with going down the sacred hole. Thus the veiling and unveiling of the opening, the revealing, and of course the opening and closing of Pandora's box. Thus we have the whore who gives the birth to the hours of the Horus. And of course this is where we get our word horizon, for Horus has risen above. And of course the opposer of Horus was Set, which is exactly why we have sunset.
From the ancient hieroglyphics in Egypt, we know much about the solar messiah. For instance, Horus, being the sun or the light, had an enemy known as Set, and Set was the personification of the darkness or night. And, metaphorically speaking, every morning Horus would win the battle against Set, while in the evening Set would conquer Horus and send him into the underworld.
So this is an age-old battle of light versus darkness. That's why I laugh at people talking about the Antichrist. Just the opposite, the opposer of the other side, which of course is what our seasonal year goes through. Winter and summer, and of course day and night. So these ancient stories of hell have been around for thousands of years before the Bible ever stole and plagiarized these ancient mythological stories. So stop the fantasy and face the truth. The story of Satan taken over or the devil taken over is just talking about the time of darkness or winter time, when nature takes over during the death of the winter or the night.
Their labors and their works do follow them.
And I looked, and behold a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat, like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud,
Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe.
And he that sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped.
So as you see, the book of Revelations is talking about the raping, the ripe reaping of the harvest. So, little white rabbit, you see that Re, or Ra, the sun, has absolutely everything to do with a rapture. So I could prove that this story was about the sun just by the etymology of the word alone, let alone proving that the story non-stop talks about the sun, the seasons, and the moon, and the stars, and every other aspect of nature, because this entire story has to do with nature, not of some mythological, dumb, man-made fairy tale.
Chapter 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. Things which must shortly come to pass.
So you see, the truth is, this time frame is talking about something in the near future, not something that's far away. It will be completed, or it will come to pass shortly, because this is talking about time. Thus, the harvest of the sower and the reaper, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning of the season and the end of the season, or the beginning of the year and the end of the year. Thus let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. It means time. And of course the reaper, harvest fertility lord himself, Saturn L, was the reaper who consumed his children, because he is the old dying man, and the children are the newborn babies, or the beginning of time. In other words, time is always being consumed by old Father Saturnel since the day we are born. So Saturn represents the age-old time at the end of the age. Thus, Saturnel is the anthropomorphic character of time itself. And just as time is transformed, so is that of the energy or matter. The soul is transformed through the process that we all know as of death, but life and death is a mere process. Thus the harvest of our soul and of our seasonal life is the eternal life, because when we are fruitful, we will multiply and carry on the seed of life.
So old Father Saturnel is just the character of nature that represents old Father Time. Thus he is consuming his children, or he's consuming time. So this is why he has the symbolism of the sickle, the reaper. He has the grains, the corn, the last sheaf, and of course he has the serpents, or the dragons. Thus the ancient depictions of the dragons of the constellations. Thus the dragon or the serpents are representing the primordial element of life. So that's why I said the red fire-breathing dragon is associated with the primordial goddess. So that's why I said when a man dresses as a woman, we call it dressing up in drag, because it's the dragon element of the female. So like I've explained, the primordial element of the serpent and the goddess go back thousands and thousands of years. So like I said today, that's why we have the queen, who has the symbol of the dragon. And of course combined with the cross of the zodiac wheel. So the dragon represents the ancient primordial Mother Earth goddess of the abyss, the primeval goddess of nature, and thus we have the dragons of the seasons of winter and summer, or the red and the blue, summer fire and winter ice.
I think we can say with certainty that neither I nor any other man can defeat this dragon.
But another dragon can.
He will bring further destruction to us.
Once again, the end of death and destruction. So you'll notice it's the dawn of a new age. So now you understand why they say it's the age of fire and ice. The two children of Mother Nature who battle one another.
I'm Mr. White Christmas, I'm Mr. Snow, I'm Mr. Icicle, I'm Mr. Ten Below. Whatever I touch turns to snow in my clutch. I'm too much.
I'm Mr. Green Christmas, I'm Mr. Sun, I'm Mr. Heat Blister, I'm Mr. 101.
So perhaps now when you watch these TV shows and, read these mythological stories, you'll understand the true essence of the Mother Earth primordial element of the goddess, Mother Nature, and of time. So, just like the Mother Serpent goddess, with her egg and her fertility, we have the dragon and the eggs. It's usually a story about the Mother Dragon that is protecting her clutch of eggs. So now you understand why the Book of Revelations is all about the woman who is dressed with the sun. She is impregnated, and of course, all of the primordial evil dragons and serpents and beasts that rise up from the abyss. And just as we have old Saturn L consuming time and eating his children, we have the story in the Book of Revelations about the dragon that stood in front of the woman waiting to devour her child. Thus, the baby newborn child being eaten and consumed is a symbol of Mother Nature consuming time. So I've explained this, many years ago in my videos, but I'll explain it again, that most people don't even understand what, the order of death, the death cult of Saturn L, or, the skull and bones is all about. So you have the decapitated skull on the cross. Thus, I've explained before about the decapitation in September and all that, the separation. The Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. Anyway, so you have the crossbones being consumed by the mouth. That's why the cross of the crossbones is in the mouth of the skull. The skull and bones is the representation of time, Father Time, Saturn L. So remember that Saturn L and our current day letter L is number 12.
12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, On the north, 3 gates. On the south, 3 gates. And on the west, 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations.
So you see, time and time again, the book of Revelations describes the zodiac wheel and the sections of the 12 houses, or the 12 tribes, the 12 disciples. And of course, that's why the book of Revelations talks about the 12 so much, and of course the 12 times 12, which is 144. It's all very simplistic, that they have turned around and made mythological.
And I looked, and lo, a Lamb stood on the Mount Sion, and with him 144,000.
Remember that the Sion is the Zion of the sun, thus the lion and the lamb, because the lion and the lamb are the symbols that represent the spring summertime, the time of the year when God's sun is between the lamb and the lion of Aries and Leo. And of course the lion and the lamb are with the cross.
The tilting of the axis results in direct sunlight falling on different places during different seasons. This causes variations in the duration of days, nights, and seasons. Relationship between the location of the overhead sun and the seasons. Similarly, the revolution of the Earth and the tilting of the axis results in different angle of the sun during different periods. The midday sun forms a 90-degree angle. Different locations of the overhead sun results in variations in the amount of solar radiation received in different areas and at different periods.
So you can see how any, revolving, rotating, recycling, repeating, rebirthing object is named after Re, the sun god, that does all of these things naturally. And of course, the sun gives off radiation, which is why we have Ra in radiation. And that gives us the radiant light. And of course, we also named radar after Ra. And of course, our radio. And of course, we have the Ra in radium, which the word is derived from the radius. So the ancients were in tune with Ra, the sun god, which is why we find Ra in so many of these ancient Kemetic or Egyptian words. They were in sync with Ra and based their lives around it. In fact, they understood how Ra was in the Ra'ain, and of course in rainbows. So Ra was the bringer of the day and the night. Thus, Ra gives us our word that we use today, known as the realms. So, like I explained earlier, the light of Ra, or Re, or the light of God, if you will, the light rays and the light essence of it was thought to be godly, so therefore any element that carried the light itself was godly, considered godly. Like I said earlier about the jewels or the gems, the diamonds, and of course the sacred oils, because all of these elements reflected or were reflectors of the light. And of course the most sacred of all is the light rays that reflected in the sacred waters. And of course, this is why the Bible has the story of the Son of Man that performs a miracle, the mirror of El. And of course, this oracle miracle is the reflection in the mirror. So the miracle, or the mirror of El, God's light that walks upon the water, or Jesus walking on the water, is that
the ray lights reflect off of the surface of the water, and therefore they walk or dance on the surface. So the water is a mirror that reflects the light exactly like a mirror. So of course those that had the light in them or the ray in them were like God, or they were kings. Therefore, you understand now why the word Rex, which means a king, has ray in it. You see, because the sun is the king that leads the way. He leads the path, the pathway. Thus, the sun is the leader. Therefore, the leader Jesus says, "Follow me." I mean, why do you think the leader Joshua commands the sun to stand still? Well, no man can do that, but sun still is the meaning of the solstice. When God's sun stands still in the realm of the mid-El. So to have the light and the wisdom within you, you were the king who sat on the throne between the pillars of knowledge and wisdom. So the king who sits upon the throne between the pillars of the sun and the moon is the ruler. He is the Rex that controls the body of the corporation of the republic of the people. Thus the sun and the moon of the Democrats and the republic. The two forces of nature that are opposed to one another, that battle and fight one another every day and every year. The seasons. So the kings of this world have always used their knowledge and wisdom and the ignorance of the people against themselves, which is exactly why the illuminated light of Re in the Rex King rules over his people and reigns over them. The reign of Re. So the kings of this world have always used their knowledge and wisdom and the ignorance of the people against themselves, which is exactly why the illuminated light of Re in the Rex King rules over his people and reigns over them. The reign of Re.
And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle.
So I've explained this a long time ago, but the angel that Ezekiel saw and the angel that was just described in Revelation is actually the cross of the zodiac. Thus, the eagle, the bull, the lion, and the man are the four crossing points of the zodiac, which are the four angs of El, the four angels, because the four angles are the four creatures that form the cross on the zodiac. And of course the four angels is the four angles of the cross of the zodiac when it was in the house of Taurus, the age of the bull, until it moved to the age of the lamb or the ram. So the angels are the angles of the zodiac, and thus the messengers of the gods, which are the seven planets that are wandering, the Elohim. So the ancient Babylonian, Assyrian, winged bull god man, with the lion's body of Babylon, the baby lion of the sun, is just the four animals, like I said, of the zodiac, and this knowledge goes back thousands and thousands of years. And by the way, in case you're wondering about these four attributes of this creature that represents the zodiac, the eagle wings actually represent the house of Scorpio, as it was once known. So the reason that the scorpion was depicted as Scorpio on the zodiac wheel, you know, the image itself and the symbolism dates back thousands of years, and that's why they put it on there. So actually today this gives rise to what we know as the Scorpion King.
Throw it! Kill the Scorpion King! Send his army back to the underworld!
Begiri Bashir!
In case you didn't realize, the Spear of Osiris is the ancient Spear of Destiny. Thus, the symbolism of the ancient Spear of Destiny can be found throughout history. The ancient Spear of the Underworld, Inanna and Tiamat. So anyway, this is why the book of Revelations is talking about the descent to the underworld in September, or the fall of the autumn equinox, during the last quarter of the year, when the evil death of winter takes over.
And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand.
So the book of Revelations has the balancing scales of Libra, when God's Son begins his descent to the underworld.
And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails, and their power was to hurt men.
So since ancient times, the scorpion has been related to the underworld, and of course to the stinging of the sun, giving it the kiss of death. And like I said, the ancient scorpion goes back thousands of years, like to the scorpion men of Tiamat, where the scorpions guarded the gates of Shamash, the sun.
And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him.
So after the house of Libra, the scales, we go to the scorpion of Scorpio, which of course is the slayer, the bringer of death. It is the reaper, the harvest, which is why the scorpion tail is in the shape of the sick L, the harvest reaper tool of Saturn L, the harvest reaper lord, and the deceiving descender of death. So this is why we have the deceiver in one of the 12 of Jesus, where Judas betrays Jesus by kissing him, giving him the kiss of death, which is actually just the house of Scorpio, the slayer death god, where after the judgment of the balancing scales, we have the sting of death as the sun now dies and goes to the underworld until it is reborn again. So let's continue our descent past Libra and Scorpio to Sagittarius.
And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow.
So of course, now we're on the horse with the bow and arrow, which of course is the symbol of Sagittarius, the ancient depiction of the arrows that are being shot down from the sun and of course the moon. So I hope all of this is understandable to you. You see, the sun, the apple, the arrows is why we have the story of shooting the apple off of the head, or the resh. So perhaps now you'll understand the true story about Robin Hood, the archer with the red hood, and of course the row of the sun, and of course the story is about the apple, which is really about the Apollo El, or the apple of Apollo, the sun god. Thus they have the contest of 12, and then the 13th is the apple, which represents the sun. And of course I've showed many times that 13 is the rebirth of God's Son, Saturn, the sun, and the moon. And that's why we sent the Saturn rocket to the moon on the Apollo mission. Remember Apollo 13? Remember the story about the journey to the moon, where the Odyssey comes into the chaotic trouble and struggle of almost dying and then returning from the rebirth of 13?
Many years ago, well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
This is Odyssey. Signing off.
The devastating rupture of the rapture of Revelation, which is why they show you the rebirth of the sun coming around at 13, and of course, the son of summer. The Apollo 13, the rebirth and regeneration of the sun, thus the new hour of the new age. So of course this is exactly why the 13 appears throughout the Illuminati elites of the elders. So now you understand the Apollo apple is the sun that gives energy and life to the apple tree, that is the tree that produces the fruits, thus the fertility symbol of life. So it's amazing that people don't understand the truth behind the pair of bowls, thus the bullshit. The stories are allegories of nature. I mean, what do you think the truth that lies behind the story of Johnny Appleseed?
Well, sir, every time I see an apple blossom sky, I think of Johnny Appleseed. Shucks, he had his apple trees in the morning sun and the evening breeze.
And so I thank the Lord for giving me the things I need, the sun and rain and an apple seed. Yes, he's been good to me.
A bag of apple seed and a holy book. And strangely enough, these are the symbols of one of the mightiest men of all, John Chapman, a real-life pioneer. With the passing years, however, reality has given way to legend. Until today, we know this remarkable man simply as Johnny Appleseed.
You see, the problem is that people don't pay attention to what the story is actually telling them. So Johnny's telling the story of the Appleseed tree sun, and of course, he is born and he dies on the equinox of September and March, because he is the John, he is the Jack of nature. He is the joker, the jester, the trickster, which is the anthropomorphic character of nature. So now you know why we have Apple Jacks. Thus, the anthropomorphic little characters that represent the harvest of nature. Thus, your bowl of cereal represents you consuming the harvest. So anyway, yes, the John is the Jack, who is the jester joker of nature. So, the anthropomorphic story that's just told by the Jack, or the jester, the joker, or John. So John is the fool with the sun behind him with the symbol of 9, the divine 9. Which of course I've explained many times, but the sacred 9, and thus the separation and the September 11th, the 7-11, or the 911, play a deep role in all of this ancient esoteric symbolism. Okay, so we've gone through the house of Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and now it's time for the golden Saturn L of Capricorn.
And there went out another horse that was red, and power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth.
So the 4 horses represent the last 4 quadrants of the last quarter of the age that ends with Capricorn.
And power was given unto them over the 4th part of the earth.
Yep, the last quarter of the harvest age. Thus the Son of God brings the death and resurrection of the reaping and the sowing of nature by the sun.
And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue hath his name Apollyon.
I just can't believe that people don't understand what's being told here. It's very simple, okay? The decline of December is when the sun is at its aspect of being the king at the time of the bottomless pit. Thus the anti-opposer.
And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon.
in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon. Remember I told you about the Hebrew earlier, about the Ab and the Av and the Ap, the abyss of the sacred waters of the Abzu, thus descending to the underworld, down the rabbit hole to the bottomless pit. So this represents the descent of the sun to the underworld when it figuratively dies or is in its ember state. So it's characterized as the deceiver, the furthest one away, the bottom of the pit, because the sun is the furthest away. Thus, it is the Abaddon that has been abandoned, thus abolished and destroyed. Thus, the life and death destruction of rebirth. And, of course, we have the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, the old and the new, thus decapitating the old year or the past from the future. Thus the dissection and the decapitation and the distance that is created from the old to the new. It is what is left behind, because your bottom is your butt, which is in the back behind you. So the Hebrew word Abaddon just means the Sheol. It means the underworld, which of course once again has to do with the ray of Rephaim. So this is why we have the abode of the dead, which is all just talking about the abolishment and the abandonment of the sun in its apex, or the farthest point away from the sun, which is the whole meaning of Apollo. He is the bringer of destruction, like the annual flooding of the waters of the Nile, thus the apis, thus the apex, and of course the apsis, and of course we have the aphelion, which is the farthest point away from the earth, the sun at its point of its descent, when the sun is at its anti or opposing to that of when it's the closest to earth, the apogee.
After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven.
Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter.
And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone.
We have the ray of the red stones of the jasper, as well as the sardine, which is the first stone that represents the sun, the sar, the prince, the pry, the primi, and it's one of the 12 stones that are worn upon the breastplate of the high priest. The 12 that obviously represents the 12 houses of the zodiac. So the sar, the SA in the sardine stone, is the resh. It represents the sun. So I've explained this before about the saw and the sun, and how all of these words represent the element of the sun. And just to let you guys know, I'll actually be making a series soon called Israel. Truth Heresy wins now and forever. But for now, let's get back to the Bible.
And had a wall great and high, and had 12 gates. And at the gates 12 angels, and names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he that talked with me had a golden reed to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lieth foursquare, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured the wall thereof, 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of the angel. And the building of the wall of it was of jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire.
Are you paying attention? The foundation stones of Revelation is the jasper and the sapphire. So the 12 foundation stones of the apocalypse of Revelation is the jasper of March and spring on the equinox, and the other side is the foundation of the blue sapphire of September, the fall-autumn equinox. So if you're paying attention, you'll understand that the foundation is built upon the red and the blue, which of course is what I've been explaining for years in my videos, all about the biblical red and blue, the dualistic principle of dividing in two. So I have to throw this in here. You have the Titans, then you have the Titanic. You remember the blue sapphire, the Hope diamond, and of course, you know, sapphire is the jewel gem stone of Saturn L, who was the Titan god. And of course, the Titanic was split in two, divided, when time itself is split in two at the mid-L during the 13th hour. Now, remember the moon goddess Diana with her blue sapphire ring? So of course, years ago I produced a documentary about Princess Di. So, like I've explained, Princess Di represents the Dia, the half, the divide, the splitting in two, which is why she's Luna, the moon, which is divided from the sun, Apollo. And of course, the moon goddess Diana was known as the goddess of the crossroads, which is exactly why Diana was killed on the crossroads on the 13th hour on the 13th pillar. And of course, Diana the moon goddess was worshipped on August 13th, and she was killed on August 31st. So Diana, the Dia goddess, was actually born on the Dia, exactly halfway through the year. And of course, that's why the state of Indiana, by the way, or in Diana, is the state of the crossroads. So I could go on, but let's get back to the White Rabbit schooling, and let's get to the truth that lies behind the fake story of the book of Revelation.
And the second angel sounded, and as it were, a great mountain burning with fire was cast into the sea, and the third part of the sea became blood, and the third part of the creatures which were in the sea and had life died, and the third part of the ships were destroyed. And the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of waters.
River Euphrates.
And the four angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened. And the day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise.
So the 1/3 is the 33%. It is also the 13. So remember the fallen angels, or the 33% that fell from heaven, the 1/3. So I explained this a long time ago, but the 1/3 is the angle that is fallen, because each house in the 36 quadrants, thus each house of the 12 has 3. So you see, each house is a microcosm of the macrocosm of the zodiac wheel. Therefore, 1/3 of the wheel falls, therefore 1/3 of each house falls within the 12. So you see, the sun enters every house and then exits every house, or falls out of every house, or out of every zodiac sign, if you will, or out of every month. So you see, the 1/3, or the last house inside the house, is called the fallen angle, or the apokalima, which means falling, because it is the end, it is the rapturing and the reaping of that house. Therefore,
It is the apocalypse of that house, but it is not the end. It is the end of that age, but it goes on. There is no end of the world whatsoever. Well, until the sun dies out, supposedly, one day. So anyway, you've seen this symbolism all the time, like when you play games like roulette, for example. I mean, the 36 quadrants of the circular zodiac, the red and the black, which represents winter and summer, the red and the blue, red and white, whatever the colors are, they represent the opposite seasons. And of course, the cross and the zodiac. And then, of course, we have the little white ball that goes around and around, which represents the sun. It is the Baal, the bull, the Baal, the white light of the sun, like the White House, Baal House. It means the white light of the sun. So, of course, that's why the white light of the Baal light of the sun has the resh in it, or the R, thus the round roulette wheel of the revolving revolutions of revelation. So you see, the ancient Babylonian calendar was actually divided into 3 sections of the year. The beginning was the Resh Sati, the middle was the Misil Sati, and the end of the year was the Kit Sati. And of course, in the Bible we have the one in bed, the one in the mill, and the one in the field, which is the life, the death, and the rebirth, which is just an ancient aspect of the Trinity, the triad of 3. So the ancient Trinity was around for thousands of years before the Bible, and it's still around thousands of years after the Bible. And of course, this sacred ancient Trinity is actually the aspect of the sacred trine of the family of the mother, the father, and the child.
For it is given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot 42 months.
The 24 elders fall down before him that sat on the throne, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months.
So evil Satan takes over, because that's what happens at night. The darkness takes over the light of the day. Or the winter evil darkness takes over the light of summer. Thus Satan becomes in power at the end, towards the judgment. Thus the 42. Thus Ma'at, who is the one who judges before you go to the underworld. Thus this time of judgment at the end of the year is all about Ma'at and 42. The 42 principles of Ma'at. And of course, this is why Osiris's body was chopped into either 14 or 42 pieces. So of course, this is why we find the number 42 in the book of the Bible, because it's all about the judgment and, of course, Ma'at, the goddess of judgment at the end of time or the end of the year. Thus, we have Matthew in the Bible. So anyway, I've covered all this before in previous videos, and of course the sacred number of 42, which, like I've explained before, is actually the number that we get from the Saturn L square of the 3x3 magic's cube or square. So when you add up the rows, it all comes to the sacred number of 42.
Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
So the 666 or the 616, whatever number you want to come up with or you can come up with, the truth and the simple fact is that this number of the beast, this number of 6 or of sex, as it's known in Latin, is still the number that represents the fertility of the sacred sex of the sun.
from sunrise to sunset, from the 6 to the 12, which represents the hours or the horuses of the day of the sun. Thus, the 6 months of winter and the 6 months of summer. So when you understand the 3 or the triangle of L, and of course the 36 and the 666, so all these numbers are just the numerology of the sun, thus the Apollyon, or Apollo, the sun god. So the ancient Egyptian obelisk was the sundial, or the obelisk of the sun. It was the ancient fertility symbol of the bull penis, which is exactly why we have the bull penis at the Vatican, and why the Pope issues a papal bull, and of course the Washington Monument, which is the bull penis of the bull god El. And that's why it's the sundial symbol, and the numerology is 666. The obelisk of the sun at the house of the sun, or the obelisk at the house of Baal. So perhaps now you'll understand why there's 50 flags around Baal, because Baal, the letter L, the number, is 50, the number of Baal, which is why we have 50 states, which of course are all divided and sectioned off by the sun square of the 6 by 6, or the 36, the 666. So all of this numerology is just sacred geometry and mathematics of the numerical values of the seasons, and of our sun, and of our moon, and of our stars, and of all life. So the 12 by 12, or the 144, is the 6 by 6 by 6, which equals the 216, which is exactly why 216 is the measurement of the sun, the light. And that's exactly why when you look up the light that God created in the Bible, in Genesis, the number that is used is 216. So in part 10, we'll be going over the 216 and the 72 and the pi and so much more, which of course are all divided and sectioned off by the sun square of the 6 by 6, or the 36, the 666. So all of this numerology is just sacred geometry and mathematics of the numerical values of the seasons, and of our sun, and of our moon, and of our stars, and of all life. So the 12 by 12, or the 144, is the 6 by 6 by 6, which equals the 216, which is exactly why 216 is the measurement of the sun, the light. And that's exactly why when you look up the light that God created in the Bible, in Genesis, the number that is used is 216. And 400 years before the Bible was written, Plato had the number of a human man as 666. And of course, the Judaic and Christian Bible has demonized this number. But the plain and simple truth is that this numerical value of 666 goes way back thousands of years before the Bible was written. In fact, when we take a look at ancient Egypt, or we take a look at ancient Babylon, for example, it was actually the base of 60 that we base our time on today. Our 60 seconds, our 60 minutes within 1 hour. So the 666 is the number of the sun, as is 216, which is why the light that God created, like I said, is Or, and it's the number of 216. Now, of course, an age in each constellation is 2,160 years, or 216.
And of course, the ancient names for God consisted of 216 names. And of course, this is why people go to the church, which is the circle of the goddess of life. It is the Cirque L, which represents the 216, the number of God's Son. And that's exactly why on the day of the sun, on Sun's Day, they go to church and worship God's Son. Because the Son is our salvation. It is the salvation of all life on earth. Because without the Son, we would all perish. So the sun and the moon are the bringers of life and death. So this is why our salvation is through God's Son. Because the Son gives us eternal life, which is the cycle of life, the Cirque of L. And of course, the circle is the building block of all life upon earth and sacred geometry, like the Metatron cube. Thus the circles create the flower of life and all of the geometric shapes, which of course once again has to do with the number of 216. So that's why the single cell circle is the single most fundamental element of all life. Thus, the reason that God made the first atom, or the Adam, which came from Atum, Atum-Ra. So Amun-Ra and Atum-Ra represented both spring as well as autumn. And of course, that's why they say that the Son of Man, Jesus, was born on the autumn equinox, or September 11th, which is at the end of the year or the end of the age, the end of the harvest season, the raping and the reaping of the year, which becomes the last months of the year, the ember months, because the sun has gone to the underworld and is now in its ember state. Because if it completely died out, it would be charcoal, or it would be ash, death, like a burnt offering, which is a holocaust, thus turning to black death from the charring and the burning. So the char is like the charcoal. It has been charred to death. Like, remember earlier when I said the charon, which is the charon, who carries and ferries the dead? So the burnt, charred charcoal of death gives us our element of carbon. And now you know exactly why they're called diamonds. The diamond. And of course now you will understand why baseball is played on a diamond. And of course, it's the mound, because the baseball is the sun that's in the center, the pitcher upon the primordial mound. And now you understand why they say that the baseball has 216 stitches, the number of the sunlight. So the charred charcoal of the carbon is the carbon cycle of life, which is exactly why we must also consume carbon. And of course, the atomic number for carbon is 6, giving us the number of 666. So 216 is a magic cubic number. Thus, the magic square or the magic cube. The magic cube of time. So the magic cube of the 6 by 6 by 6 is the 216. So almost all of us are familiar with the 3 by 3 magic Rubik's Cube, which is the Saturn cube. And by the way, the Ru in Rubik's Cube is named after the Resh, or the R, of the sun, which is why we have the red ruby. And that's exactly why Ruby Tuesday is red. The black cube of Saturn and the golden cube of the Sun. Which is exactly why 216 has to do and is related to the golden ratio, known as pi. Thus, the pi in the Sunfire pyramids. So the ancient pyramids are numeric symbols that represent the numerical values of nature, of the sun, and of the seasons. Thus, the numerical values of time. So the ancient relationship of the golden ratio and pi and the numerical value of 216 is the entire subject and theme of the movie of Pi.
"1245. Restate my assumptions. 1. Mathematics is the language of nature. 2. Everything around us can be represented and understood through numbers. 3. If you graph the numbers of any system, patterns emerge. Therefore, there are patterns everywhere in nature."
You ever hear of Kabbalah? Jewish mysticism.
Insomnia haunts him and he twists and turns in his bed.
Maybe that pattern is like the pattern in the stock market, the Torah, this 216 number. Maybe that pattern is like the pattern in the stock market, the Torah, this 216 number.
This is insanity, Max.
Or maybe it's genius. I have to get that number.
Hold on, you have to slow down. You're losing it. There will be no order, only chaos.
The seasons of life. Order out of chaos. The red and the blue. So as you can see, the number of 216 is related to not only God and to, that of life around us, but of the sun, the moon, and the stars. Because these numbers and this numerology represents the sacred numbers of time, of the seasons, of life. Thus, the fertility of life and of time and of the seasons. So the magic cube is the magic cube of life and of time. So you see, this is why Apple has the cube, which is of course the 3 by 3 by 3 or the 6 by 6 by 6. And like I said earlier, the app of L is all about consuming the fertility and the sexual union of Adam and Eve. So Steve Jobs combined his knowledge and wisdom with the symbol of the apple because it represented the eternal fertility of life. And would you believe that Apple was created in April, which is the month of the Fool, on April 1st, Fool's Day. And on the 6th year, in 1976, the first Apple computer sold for $666.66. 666. So of course this was the 666 of the fertility beast of nature, the sun, and of course Apollo, the sun god. So this is why we see the Trinity fertility in the World Wide Web, because the W comes from the Vav, which is the number 6. So again, we find the fertility of 666, or sex, sex, sex. The fertility trinity of life, death,
and rebirth of the triple sex, or the triple X. Which of course is why our computers are all about the fertility and the creation and the wisdom and the knowledge of sex. So when you compare the computer and the Bible, you'll be surprised that you'll find a lot more in common than you ever imagined, because they're both all about the natural sexual creation of life and rebirth and death. So as you see, the Illuminati are very ritualistic with their numerology and their dates. Thus, the very reason that Apple actually began on a new moon, the new sliver of the new virgin moon. So when you do your research on the Bible and do the research of time and the numerology of time and of the seasons, months and years and days and weeks and minutes and seconds, you'll understand all of the numerology in the Bible and, that of God. That's why they say that God has also 72 names. The 216, the 144, the natural numbers of life and of time. So anyway, now you'll understand why our monolithic monitors have a resolution of 72 dpi, which is the little squares, the little pixels, which is exactly why the color spectrum of our monitors, the web color cube, is 216. And by the way, the color of the red sun in the light spectrum is 666. So anyway, this is why we have the ISO standard of 216. So now you'll understand why the Bayan temple has 216 faces. This is why the temple is oriented or facing towards the east, where the sun rises. So now you'll understand why the priests are all dressed in bright orange and yellow, because those are the colors of the sun, and that's why they're the priests, just like the Dalai Lama, because they represent the sun in the east, which is why we have Easter, for example, thus the rabbit and the lamb of springtime. So in parts 1 through 10, I covered many aspects of the etymologies that are related to the aspect of the sun god, Ra, or Re, or Apollo, Shamash, and by Utu and many other names throughout history. So let's take a look at some words that are etymologically related to the sun god, Re, or Ra. Like I said earlier, the sun is the sower and the reaper of the harvest. So this is why Ra is named after the sun god. So the harvest is the end of the age, the end, which is death, the harvest. So that's why we have the catcher and the rye, which of course is all about the red, bloody death. So much of mythology and mysteries of today actually come from the ancient harvest, the ancient grain rituals that were around for thousands of years before the Bible. And of course, all of this ancient mysticism is based upon the annual cycles of the harvest, the sowing and the reaping, thus the life and death. So these ancient rituals all revolved and had all of this death mysticism towards the end of the age at the end of the harvest, which is death of life. Thus it was known as the last sheaf, which held all of the prophecy and the mystic spiritual elements that were held in the harvest. And this last sheaf was known as the ancient, goddess, but also basically the spirit of life itself in the harvest, and it had to be carried over into the next year. Thus, in order to be reborn, it had to be slain. And this is where we get the concept of the slain god or the slain king, the killing of the king. And of course, they always have to chop them into pieces. Thus, Saturn was chopped into pieces, Dionysus, Baal, and of course, Osiris. And and that's why when JFK, the king, was slain during noontime, the time of the sun, high noon, thus we saw his wife picking up his pieces and gathering his parts, exactly like Osiris and Isis. So just like Osiris, it was the resurrection from death, aka what we know today as the Green Man. Thus, the life of God's Son, the sower and the reaper, the seed of divide. So you see, the truth is, the devil, Satan, is just Saturn. Both are known to be ruling at the end of the age, because that's what they symbolize. They symbolize death at the end of the age, which is why we have the last sheaf, for example. It's just talking about the age of Saturn, when he rules over and takes over the time of the sun during that season. So that's why we have the last book in the Bible, the book of Revelation. And if you did your research, you'd know that the Bible takes its name from the Phoenician city of Byblos, which takes its name by the way of Cronus, or Saturn. And so some people tell me, Truth Heresy, your etymology only works on some words. It can't work on all words, like Ra, for example, or Ray. How does the word rat, relate to Ray or Ra? You see, rats and mice are rodents. The Ro of the Ra of Re, the sun god. But how, might you ask, are they related? Simple. They are related in every fundamental way, because the rats were always in the fields, in the crops. The rats, the rodents, and the mice were the ones that were attracted to the grains and the rice, which is named after the rays of the sun. So in fact, the etymology does lead us to the root source and the true meaning. You see, that's why the grains are the Gaia and Ra, the earth and the sun. So through etymology alone, the very word grain is very revealing, thus showing Gaia, Ra, and the Ain, the earth, the sun, and the rain. So of course this gives us our GR words like grain, grow, grass, and group, that all grow green on the ground of Gaia. And so now you'll understand the name of a grape. And of course, the grapes make the wine, which is created by the seasons of the rain and the sun. Which of course is why Jesus' first miracle is to change water into wine, because that's what the Son of God does. And of course, rodents and rats are symbols of fertility, because they are prolific and they reproduce rapidly. So the dent in rodent is referring to the DE word, or a dalet word from Hebrew, implying that it's a doorway going down to the underworld, like a hole, like a dent, or like when we go to the dentist, like a mother's den, the cavity, the hole, the sacred hole of the goddess, thus Mother Earth. And of course, rats crawl and live inside of dens and holes, exactly like the serpents, which of course is the fertility symbol of the male, which devours the rodents. And of course, Apollo, the sun god, was known to transform into a rodent, thus Apollo playing the role of the harvest lord. He is the one who is in control of the crops in the fields. Thus, he has to control the rats, the mice, and the rodents. So on the sundial Chinese zodiac, which dates back thousands of years, we find the symbology of the rat, which actually basically correlates to the time of winter, which correlates to the zodiac house of Capricorn, Saturn L. So most people aren't even aware of the symbolism and the mystique and the ancient mythological aspect that the rodent plays in our society. This is why it's embedded in all of our media and our stories, and our culture. So this ancient mythological aspect of the rodent is why they indoctrinate our children and use the rodents in cartoons and animations. So since we've been kids, we've been spoon-fed these concepts, but we were most likely blind to realizing that these symbolic creatures were the very foundation of many of our cartoons as we grew up. So rats are crafty little creatures, and they're very cunning, and they're survivalists, and this is why they play an important role, like I said, in our culture. So most people don't realize that, the mouse and the rats are, they're portrayed to be cute, but they're actually symbolically, evil and nasty and gross. And of course, this is why it is associated with witchcraft and sorcery.
Then he transformed into a rat. Show me. Give in to him, Ron. What are you trying to do to him? Scabbers! Leave him alone! Get off him! What are you doing? Scabbers!
And of course, this is exactly why the Bible has the golden mouse. The gold represents the sun and the silver represents the moon. In Christianity, the mouse is demonized for allegedly gnarling at the foot of the cross. Thus, rodents and rats are creatures of foresight and prudence. So that's why a race to your death is known as a rat race. In fact, the very word race has the word Ra in it. In fact, in the ancient world, many races were held in the honor of the sun god, the golden sun god Apollo. So now you understand why the Wizard of Oz is the sun going through the 4 seasons on the yellow brick road. So this is why races are held in lanes or roads, because the road is from Ra, the sun. And when we're on a road, that's why we follow the yellow brick road, where you'll find reflectors. And so now you'll understand why our cars have Horus power of the sun Apollo god and his horse. So we're going to come back to Apollo the sun god, but first I want to cover a few other etymologies. So we know that the rapture related etymologies of rapid, ripple, ripe, rape, and wrapped are etymologically related, but I want to explain why and how. So the word ripe has an easier and more direct relevance to the sun, so therefore it's a little easier to grasp and understand. So throughout the season, the sun ripens the harvest, and then we reap it. We strip it clean, which is why the ripe reaping is related to rape, which is why we have the ancient abduction story of Persephone and Hades to the underworld for 6 months, as I explained earlier. So a raping is a reaping. You are stripping away and cutting off and abducting the harvest. We are seizing the harvest and carrying it off. The real and true etymology of the word rape, which brings us to our next relevant related word
to rap. So yes, indeed, the word rap, or when somebody raps, rapping comes from Ra or Re, the sun god. So the word rap and rapture are actually rooted etymologically. And of course, the rapture comes at the end, or the death, like winter or the nighttime, that takes over the daytime. Thus the red that is overtaken by the blue. So you see, it's the two sides that fight and struggle against one another. It's the ancient seasons battling one another. Red versus blue, like the Bloods versus the Crips. The two gangs that battle and fight one another, fighting to become number one. Which is why they fight back and forth and try to outdo one another, trying to say I'm better than you are. And that's why they rap, because they're trying to rapture and rape and reap the other.
I read your book, you got a strict religion, no bacon, but mandatory circumcision. I'm a jolly bowl of jelly, giving holiday presents, but all the chosen people ever get for Christmas is jealous.
Who gets lost for 40 years?
You're a glorified secretary, so write this down.
We got these nuts.
Santa Claus is coming to town.
So much drama in the Israel BC. It's kinda hard talking directly to the G-O single D. Hand me my chisel, I got a new command missile for y'all. Thou shalt not let children sit on a grown man's lap at the mall.
And what do you get from the red and the blue? You get the deity, or the rap god.
Could I not blow? All I do is drop F-bombs. Feel my wrath of attack rappers are having a rough time period. Here's a maxi pad, it's actually disastrously bad. For the whack while the masterfully constructing this masterpiece. I'm beginning to feel like a rap god, rap god. All my people from the front to the back nod, back nod. Now who thinks their arms are long enough to slap box, slap box? Morphing into an immortal coming through the portal. You're stuck in a time warp from 2004.
The mistake is a shame.
It's a fatal mistake if you think I need to be overseas and take a vacation to trip abroad and make a fall in the face it. You'll be a retard. Be a king? Think not. Why be a king? You can be a god. I might like a little Alizé with a side of knife woman, ride a motorcycle bike right through the side of my high school. Satan's disciple with a sniper rifle and a knife and a white diaper, liable to you while I snipe you.
So like I said, the raping and the reaping is when Saturn, or Satan, the person or character that represents the end of times, takes over. Because one side was in control of the sun for their season, and now it has been won over and battled and lost to the new one who takes over. The character that represents the sun in that season. So at the end of the year, we find the character of Santa Claus and Satan and Saturn, because that's what it all represents. Thus the goat of Saturn, thus the goat of Satanists, thus the inversion, because it's that time of the year when old Father Time at the end is old and is inverted as soon as time goes to 1201. Because it becomes the new hour or the new year. Thus, the 13th hour or the 13th month is the new year. So the Antichrist is just simply the character that represents the time of opposition. As above, so below. The time of inversion or hanging upside down. Saturnalia, Christmas. It becomes the new year. But the rebirth does not come until the raping and the reaping. Thus, the rapid rapture of the rap that seizes and carries off the number one spot, the winner. And just as the evil darkness and death of the night takes over the goodness of the day, so does the evilness and death of winter take over summer. It will always be this way. This is exactly why the winner of a race will always be the winter, the winner. So now you know why these characters and all of their evil symbolism and their numerology and everything It all has to do with Satan and the devil. 13, 666, which are all really just symbolic and numerical values for the seasons of life, and a prime example of how the Illuminati uses the ignorance of the people against themselves. So that's why Eminem has his name forwards and reverse, as well as him, in his video about the fire, and of course he's in the fields, the rye fields of death. So he's showing you the ancient harvest blood sacrifice rituals that were held in the sacred fields. The crops that grew from the sun and then were to be reaped and carried off and raptured. So that's why the rappers are playing the role of the reaper, the slayer, because they are there to seize the moment. The slayer of time, the rain man of death and rebirth. So once again we see the connection of the sun and water that brings life to this world, the cycle of life. So this is why we find sun etymology in water. So we all know that light reflects on top of water, which is why Jesus walked on top of water. But also the very word ripple, we find the rip, the rye word, R-I, from the sun. So just like the water wave motion, you have the wave motion or the radiation wave length, or the light wave, which is a motion of back and forth, up and down. And of course, this is exactly what the rappers are doing. They're going back and forth and going over repetitive patterns, which is why they repeat themselves. And of course, that's why they say they've gone through the first heat or the first wave. And like I explained earlier, the sun moves in a wave formation across the sky. So waves are slower than ripples because ripples are rapid, which is exactly why we have rapid waters that are moving rapidly. The red and the blue, the one that says bye to two, which is why at the end when we leave, we say bye and we wave our hands. So now you understand why the rappers are rapidly repeating and rhyming words. The continuous motion and flow, which is why the rapper raps and flows. The rapid, repetitive motion and recycling and repeating. So this is why we have the spinning, recycling record of Ray, which records as a record, a moment in time. So it's an LP, which of course is 12 inches and runs at 33 1/3 RPMs. So now you'll understand why they say he ran that race in record time. And by the way, the first LP was unveiled on June 21st, 1948, the summer solstice. And by the way, since you understand the truth about the inversion of the opposite character, you'll understand why they play records in reverse and then say that it's going to have a satanic message. So for those who are wondering what the difference between rap and rap is and how they're exactly alike, allow me to explain. So today we know the earth revolves around the sun, but of course the ancients thought the sun revolved around the earth. And one of these cycles was always celebrated as a year, and that's why we celebrate a birthday, for example. So on these dates, at the end of the cycle, we received a gift, a present, which of course is always wrapped up, because it's at the end when you wrap things up, like the red bow on a wreath, which marks the end as well as the beginning. Thus, the ancient rituals of the golden bow or the bow that we put on our presents, which of course is why they also have ribbons. So you place the ribbon on the outside when you're all finished and done, just like our ribs, by the way. So anyway, that's why the Bible has doomsday, the end of days, you know, the end time prophecies, the final battle, you know, Revelations, Apocalypse, and Armageddon. It all is talking about the end times, the end of the age, the end of a cycle, not the end of the world and not the end of time. So now you'll understand that in a race, at the end, at the finish line, you run through the ribbon. And at the very, very end of the race, they place the ribbon around your neck, either gold, silver, or bronze. And I've explained this in my past videos, but the serpent is the garland or the ribbon that we wrap around our Christmas trees. And by the way, for those that don't know, Apollo was the god of music. And for obvious reasons, the sun has a repetitive pattern, like a tempo or a beat, like the repetitive patterns and the rhyming, which of course has the etymological root of ray. Now, of course, all rappers rap with their mouth. So when we take a look at Ra or Re, the sun god, in the Egyptian hieroglyphic form, you'll notice that the letter R, or the Resh, is the symbol for the mouth, meaning speech. So, of course, the best rapper gets the golden crown, the seated king, the reaper, the slayer, the one who destroyed his enemies to be throned and crowned as king. The Hebrew word kara means to speak out or to call out. And the word for reap is katsar, like the red sun of the sardine stone. So Ra was the divine name. His name was the hidden name, the secret name, the unspoken name of God. So the unspoken, hidden, true, secret name of Ra was actually given to the goddess Isis. So Ra's hidden divine name, his secret name, gave him the power to create by merely speaking them into existence.
Within the heart of the living noon stirred the spirit of the waters, the great snake, Appa. From the coils of Appa sprang Atum, first god of creation. In his heart he created their names and spoke them. Shu, the air. Tefnut, the moisture. And they were given form. Atum spoke the name of his soul bird, Bennu, the phoenix. Bennu landed on the first dry land and laid his egg. Atum joined with the light of his creation, and Ra came into being. The light of Ra dispelled the darkness of the moon.
So it's hysterical and ironic that the Hebrew, Christian, Judaic religion has the divine name of God, the secret, hidden name of God. So the mouth is used to profess words, thus the prophecy of the future. And since ancient times, the kings, the priests, they were the ones that were looked upon to guide the people and lead them into the future. Therefore, they had to know the prophecy of the future, which meant knowing where the sun, the moon, and the stars are. So in the next video, the last video in this series of 12,
I'm going to explain how the biblical prophecies have plagiarized from the ancient prophecy of the sun, God, Apollo, and the oracles of prophecy.
Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and to keep those things which are written therein. For the time is at hand.
The time is at hand, which of course was 2,000 years ago.
Prophecy believers have never stopped hunting for this figure, Christ's evil opponent, Satan's human representative on earth.
The Antichrist will read Scripture, he'll quote Scripture, and he will do signs and wonders and miracles.
For prophecy believers, the Antichrist is an arch-criminal who stands accused in advance of his crime. To some, these ideas may sound like fantasy. But for many, here at the New Life Church, an 11,000-member megachurch in Colorado Springs, Colorado, this supernatural showdown between Christ and the Antichrist is seen as nothing less than the Word of God.
The Bible says there will be an Antichrist, and I believe that there is one individual that will be in the end times causing everything that's evil to take place.
I believe that it's probably going to be a gentleman that is going to be of European descent, that will come out of a European country, and that will be looked upon as a man who initially has all the answers to the world's problems.
The Antichrist is the principal opponent of the Lord Jesus, who will be ultimately crushed and defeated.
My opinion is 100% Scripture. The Bible is the Word of God, and that's what I believe.
God has never said even one word ever.
Members of the New Life Church come to hear Pastor Ted Haggard preach about the works of Christ.
He is so good! Oh, yeah!
But he, like many evangelical Christians, is equally outspoken about the agenda of the Antichrist.
The Antichrist spirit will be embodied in an Antichrist.
Haggard's views are hardly those of a tiny fringe of Christianity. In addition to being the New Life Church's founder, he heads up the National Association of Evangelicals, 45,000 churches with 30 million members. Evangelicals belong to one of the fastest growing segments of Christianity in the country. The Antichrist has continued to be a vital part of this teaching, and today he stands front and center in the culture war.
Notice the sun behind him.
Antichrist is a deceiver. He will lure, he's what I call the Pied Piper of heresy, and he will lure all unsuspecting people to the lake of fire and brimstone.
So the truth to the biblical lake of fire is that it comes directly from the ancient Greek as well as the Egyptian concepts of the underworld. Again, we don't find an original biblical concept. Instead, we find an ancient concept that was plagiarized. The concept of the annual yearly cycle of the judgment, or the time of harvest, aka the end of the year, the end of the cycle, the time that one was judged before they went to the underworld. So this is why the book of Revelation talks about the lake of fire. And, of course, it talks about the book of life. Exactly like the Egyptian book of the dead. The judgment and the wrath of God.
Nonetheless, interest in end-of-time prophecy remained high.
And God would then pour out horrible judgments on the earth against Antichrist, against his followers. Famines, earthquakes, wars, epidemics, all kinds of divine judgments which wipe out a third of the world's population. I mean, you just can't imagine anything worse.
That was a classic example of how the Illuminati uses mind control to fool the ignorant sheeple. You see, the truth is, since ancient times, since the dawn of mankind, since the dawn of earth, there has always been, and there will always be, the destructive, catastrophic, chaotic annihilation and death. So the plain and simple truth is, there has always been natural disasters throughout history. And these terrifying events were always perceived as the end of the world, which of course was based on fear and ignorance. Because for thousands of years now, the sheeple have always been led to believe that the end of the world or the end of life is near, keeping them on edge and to be fearful. So like I said, the truth is that there has always been disasters throughout history. And these disasters have even killed multi-millions of people in just one event. So that's why throughout history, countless thousands of times, these end-time prophecy professors of the end of the world have always been wrong. So they can believe the lie all they want. But the truth and simple facts are that there will always be destructive forces in nature. But for thousands of years, Christians have been pointing the finger and trying to pinpoint who and where and when Satan or the devil will appear. They are lost in blind ignorance because they don't understand what the Bible is actually talking about. So all of the ancient and current terrifying, horrible events and natural disasters throughout history are just simply nature doing its thing. So the elite elders of the Illuminati know the truth. They just use, like I said, the ignorance of the people and their blindness to the facts against themselves. The earth has always been going through changes since it began, and what was once an ocean may someday be a desert. And you'll notice how the Illuminati is always trying to make us believe that we're gonna get attacked or the end will come by a natural disaster like an asteroid. And just like September 11th, they'll use a false flag attack and probably say that it was a meteor. So why do you think they're always showing the asteroid as our biggest threat? Because they can use this simple natural disaster. And if you understand, the very word disaster has the word die-aster. The Death Star, which of course is why the Death Star has the crater in it.
The Bible says there will be an antichrist, and I believe that there is one individual that will be in the end times causing everything that's evil to take place.
Notice how he said he believes that there will be one individual, which is the classic Illuminati ploy of the scapegoat, the lone gunman, placing all the blame in just one individual. And the sheeple suck it up, busy pointing fingers in all of the wrong directions, falling for and taking the bait of the patsy, the fall guy or the scapegoat, the classic lone gunman.
That there is one individual that will be in the end times causing everything that's evil to.
And it's funny how he thinks that one person is to blame for the evilness, like Satan or the devil or the Antichrist, when the truth is, the God of the Bible makes it clear that he is the one that created evilness, not Satan or the devil.
After long and difficult study, Miller believed he had discovered the key to deciphering the mysterious prophecies in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation. He predicted that the apocalypse would occur sometime in the years 1843 and 1844. William Miller's prediction launched one of the largest apocalyptic movements in history.
At one point, the estimates are that he had as many as 500,000 followers. He had charts of the beast and the horns and had it all figured out down to the date that it was supposed to come. And that led to what they call the Great Disappointment.
William Miller's apocalypse did not take place, but his Millerite movement never faltered. Today, its spiritual descendants far outnumber the original 500,000 believers. Over 7 million Seventh-day Adventists and 4 million Jehovah's Witnesses trace their spiritual descent in part from William Miller. For nearly 2,000 years, Christians have wondered when the final days foretold in the book of Revelation would come to pass.
So, it's interesting that 200 years or so before Jesus, people were reading Daniel and saying this is the time.
That at the end of time, a Savior will come to earth to resurrect the dead, reward the good, and punish the wicked. But what John of Patmos actually wrote about Armageddon differs considerably from what millions of people believe will someday happen there.
Notice how they show you the rays of Re, the sun god.
The number of people who've sold all their goods and went out and sat on the hillside and waited for the end to come are legion, but they're still sitting there, or they had to foolishly go back to their homes the next day and say, it didn't happen that way.
Is the book of Revelation a timeless moral drama, or a ghastly blueprint for the end of time? After nearly 2,000 years, there is no evidence that humanity will ever lose its fascination with the Bible's final book, or that we will ever unravel all of its secrets.
And of course, they are showing you right in front of your face. It's right here, God's Son. And it's mind-boggling listening to pastors and preachers talking about absolutely nothing they know of, preaching what they think they know, but are nowhere near the truth.
When Nero died, Jews living in the Roman Empire might well have believed the world was coming to an end. The people of Judea were fighting a bloody war against their Roman masters, which would end with the utter destruction of Holy Jerusalem and its temple.
Believe me, folks, not one preacher in this world has ever been, nor will ever be, correct. It's a shame that these good people are sitting there professing these bullshit stories and lies.
Hello, folks. This is Pastor Mike Hoggart, pastor of Bethel Church in Festus, Missouri, and head of Prophetic Research Ministry, with a special edition of the Watchman video broadcast. You see up here on the screen different forms of divination: palm reading, reading the lines in their hands to determine your future, crystal ball gazing, or there you see the image of the from Sleeping Beauty. This is called scrying. This is when you look into a well of water, or a bowl of water, or mercury, or a mirror of some kind, something that has reflection to it, and the practice is called scrying. And how do they hear about this stuff? Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all of these occult books, even these occult books that are being written under the guise of Christian fiction, like Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, that these kids are picking up on this stuff. And this young lady admitted to me that she would do what was called mirror gazing or scrying. She would gaze into a mirror, go into some trance, and a familiar spirit would get in contact with her. This is an abomination. The old days, the pre-Gothic days, I guess, of ancient Europe, And these runes were used in religious occult practices to divine or to gain insight by casting out these runes. And these particular letters stood for various things, and whatever order they came out in, that would determine their fate or their future or whatever. They would read the future by throwing out these runes.
It's astonishing to me that everything that these people preach against is actually everything that Christianity is about. They are always trying to point the finger at Satanists and pagans, what have you, when the truth is that every single aspect of all the things that this preacher right here is listing is exactly what the Bible's all about. Familiar spirits, the Holy Ghost, witchcraft, sorcery, and of course even necromancy. The audacity to point the finger about the evil necromancer when the truth is that Jesus in the Bible was a necromancer. He rose the dead and brought them back to life. And of course Jesus himself was the firstborn of the dead. And it just blows me away how these guys point fingers about how bad divination is, or fortune telling, or tarot cards, or what have you, when the truth is that the entire Bible is based upon divination and prophecy. Divination of predicting the future.
Armageddon, the great whore of Babylon, the four horsemen of the apocalypse. These ghastly images from the book of Revelation repel and fascinate the world. The book of Revelation is the Bible's final book. In a series of strange and powerful visions, it foretells God's final judgment of humanity and the terrible annihilation of the earth. In a series of strange and powerful visions, it foretells God's final judgment of humanity and the terrible annihilation of the earth.
So if you actually take 5 minutes or more and study the Bible, you'll come to the realization very, very quickly that the entire Bible is all about prophecy, divination, fortune-telling, predicting the future. The biblical God knows the past and the future. So, like all of the ancient gods, he was a god of prophecy. He knows what you'll say before you even say it. And of course, when he sent his only begotten son to be sacrificed, he already knew what the outcome would be. Therefore, it was child sacrifice. He sent his only begotten Son of God to be an offering, which of course is why he accepted it and the people were saved. Which of course is the exact same reason they've made sacrifices for thousands of years. So the truth is the Bible is all about human blood sacrifice. And of course the Bible is all about astrology, and it even tells you to use the sun, the stars, and the moon as signs. The Mazzaroth, and the list is endless with all of the astrological aspects. So yes, the Bible is crammed full of astrology. And again, they point the finger at enchantments and spells and incantations, when that's what the entire Bible is all about. And if you don't believe me, you better do your research before you assume that I'm wrong. So on one hand, they are condemning divination and casting spells, interpreting omens, etc., when the truth and the facts are the entire Bible is all about divination, the divine word of God, and the prophecy of the future.
And how did they hear about this stuff? Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all of these occult books, even these occult books that are being written under the guise of Christian fiction, like Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe.
He forgot to mention the #1 occultic book in the world, the #1 children's book in the world, the Bible. I mean, you want to talk about indoctrinating the youth? When the #1 book in the world that indoctrinates our youth is religious texts. What do you think every single movie, the vast majority, is about? It's all about the biblical story. That's why all the movies, like I've explained so many of times, are all about the same exact story, and nobody sees it. That's why I always say it's like the orphan going down the rabbit hole or to the underworld, of course, like Jesus did. The two sides that battle, the Bibles or the divine division of the two seasons of the annual cycles of the moon and the sun. So yes, prophecy is 100% divination, predicting the future. And of course that's why John of Patmos was John the Divine. The divination of the soothsayer, the one who scries and has the mystic predictions of prophecy, which is fortune-telling. The ancient Greek island of Patmos, which was the sunken island that Apollo, the sun god, rose from the depths of the ocean.
In a series of strange and powerful visions, it foretells God's final judgment of humanity and the terrible annihilation of the earth.
So perhaps now you'll understand why you have a pastor of the past and a preacher who preaches and predicts and tells you about the future. So the preacher is the priest, the pri, which means before, pre, the prion of Sion, the sun. So every single preacher in the world, regardless of the religious background, is nothing more than a preacher who is predicting and who is a fortune teller, a glorified soothsayer. So while they're busy pointing fingers at these mystic, prophetic, pagan practices, they forgot to use their own divination to realize that they are nothing more than a scryer, a palm reader, a soothsayer, a mystic, a gypsy fortune teller. And that's why the Bible is based 100% upon the stars, the sun, and the moon, which are the signs for the seasons of the days, the hours, and the years. And that's exactly why it's the prophetic prophecies of God, the Word of God. And what's the ancient Word of God? The word is Or, the Or of the sun, the oracle of Delphi, where the sun god Apollo was the king, the god of prophecy, the ancient Greek oracle of Delphi, which was the temple of the sun god Apollo. And just as the Egyptian sun god Re or Ra or Horus or Osiris, what have you, was the resurrection god, the sun god of rebirth, which was related to the serpent, etc., the prophecy of life. Thus, we have the exact same characteristics in Apollo the sun god, or Helios, who is the one with the prophetic word of God, professing the future. So remember I told you the Egyptian sun god Ra, or Re, was signified and identified by one of the symbols known as the R, which was the symbol of the mouth, the Or of the mouth, and of course the Or of the sun. Thus the prophecy of the sun, which is why we have the oracle of Delphi. So it was the will and the word of the sun god Apollo that was actually prophesied through the prophetic words of the drug-induced trance of the oracle priestess.
She was the most powerful woman in the ancient world, the priestess of Apollo, also known as the Oracle of Delphi. Kings, emperors, and generals sought her advice. Wars started and ended on her counsel. To the ancient Greeks, she was the voice of God. In Greek mythology, the city of Delphi was the home of the Python, a giant serpent who terrorized humans. The legend says that the Greek god Apollo killed the Python, whose corpse then fell into a large crevice in the earth. Powerful vapors rose up from the crevice, causing hallucinations when they were inhaled. The people of Delphi believed the fumes came from the rotting corpse of the python, and that they gave mortals a way to hear messages from Apollo. People of Delphi built a shrine over the crevice and appointed a woman to inhale the vapors and communicate with Apollo on their behalf. This priestess was called the Pythia, after the decaying python underground. She also became known as the Oracle of Delphi. From all over the world, people flocked to Delphi to get what they believed was a message from God. Delphi became the center of the world.
So, to the ancient Greeks, the will or the prophecy of God was through his son, Apollo, the sun god. Which of course is why the prophecy and the will and the word of God is through God's Son. So again, we find the correlation between the Son and prophecy. And of course, once again, we have the same theme of the Son, the prophecy, the serpent, and the goddess. Which of course is everything that you'll find in the prophecies of the much later Bible. So in case it's not clear in your head, you have Apollo the sun god and his word, his prophecy of the future. You have the serpent, which is the dragon, and the sacred goddess. So go read your Bible and you'll find that these are the exact attributes that you'll find in the stories. So if you want to believe in fairy tales and fantasy, then go ahead and believe the prophecies of the Bible. But the truth is, these aspects go way back into history. The serpent, the sun, the goddess, the water. So like I said, every aspect of Christianity and the Judaic Hebrew religion, if you will, is all based upon ancient religions, which is why they all have so much in common. And, you know, there's things like the Trinity, of course, that we have with the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle would sit on a tripod and thus give her divination. So, of course, today this is why we have the concept of the three witches. The three witches who prophesy the future. Thus we have the three witches or the fates. And this is exactly why, in fact, we have the trinity of the three or the tripod with that of the future prophecy in time. Which is why even today, if you have you see a crystal ball, you'll see that it's on a tripod. And in fact, today we even find the Trinity in our hour of time. Thus, we have the hourglass that is constructed of the three pillars. And exactly why our clocks or our hours today are made of three. The tri of the Trinity. The tripod of the future and prophecy. So perhaps now you'll understand a little bit more about the tri of the Trinity of three. And when you study the Bible, this is why you'll find the sacred Trinity or the trine of three. So we find that the Bible once again plagiarizes these ancient concepts, thus the trine or the Trinity of three, which goes way back into history. So you can either choose to believe their lies and their masks of the truth, or you can do your research and find the truth, because the truth is very simple and lies are very complicated. And that's why my truth is universal, so you can apply it to anything. For example, when your life is in your hands, we use fate. We use the Trinity of the Three, which is why when you go to jump out of an airplane, for example, you say 1, 2, 3, and then you go, because that is the Trinity of the prophecy of your fate. So that's why these biblical scholars just don't grasp what they're reading and understand anything that the Bible's actually about. Like 1/3. You know, all the Revelation in 1/3 and Satan in 1/3, thus the fallen angels 1/3, 33%. I mean, they just don't understand the truth. You know, why Satan was loosed for a season, which is 3 months. So, like I said, the zodiac wheel of the year, the prophetic year of time and life, is the 36 quadrants that are made up of 3 in each house. So 1/3 of this wheel is fallen or dies. 1/3 will be smitten or destroyed. And at one point the Egyptian year was broken down into 3 seasons, which of course still consisted of the 12. And that's exactly why we have the oracle of the breastplate of the high priest, the priest who prophesied the future and used the jewels as charms of divination. They used it for the guidance from God, which is his divination or his will, his word. And that's exactly why it was the oracle or the breastplate of judgment, the biblical divination, fortune telling, and the prophecy of the future. So now you understand the trinity of the zodiac wheel and why the Last Supper features 4 groups of 3. And now you understand the 1/3 and what it has to do with judgment, which is exactly why we have the trident of 3 with the devil or Satan. And of course I explained how he is loosed for a season, and thus the biblical judgment that comes at the end. And of course now you understand a little bit more about the truth and justice system. And of course, if the time ever comes that you have to be judged yourself, you'll face a judge of the Judaic faith, the judicial law, which is why Jesus also faced Judas, the judgment of the 3. And of course, that's why when you get judged, you get the 3rd degree. And that's why the Master Mason sits on his throne on the 3rd step, exactly like the judge on the 3rd step or the 3rd level. And thus the judge holds your future and your prophecy in their hands. And by the way, a reader or a person of divination was known as a mystic or a medium, because they were in between you and God. Exactly what a judge does. They are the middle person in between the left and right sides that battle one another. Thus the judge is in the mid-L, exactly like Jesus and exactly like God, who is in the mid-L. So when the judicial Judaic judge judges your fate, you have to go to a tri-L. So for the first time in your life, perhaps you'll understand exactly why the book of Revelations, the last book and the judgment of the Bible, the biblical God, begins this epic with the the 3, the tribulation, the judgment, and the wrath of God. So believe me, don't listen to these prophetic professors who know absolutely nothing about the truth and the future of our true God and our true prophecy.
So, John, you found events that must occur before the rapture. Give me some examples and what that meant to you in your belief of end-time theology.
So as I was doing this study, one of the revelations, in fact, it was the first key revelation after a year, and I'm saying, God, help me finish. And that revelation came from Revelation, and this that it was talking about, the beast coming out of the sea, was a one world government. Revelation chapter 6, the sixth seal, there was a great earthquake, and the sun goes dark, and the moon does not give its light. Well, you see, I see the chapter 6 of Revelation as the period of time that the church will go through tribulation. And at the opening of the sixth seal, when the sun goes dark, the seventh seal is silence in heaven for 30 minutes. I believe that's the rapture.
Isn't that cute? He believes the lie.
If one wanted to approach the oracle, one had to bring a goat, and the priests would sprinkle some water on the goat. If the goat started shaking, and shaking pretty violently, then it was an auspicious moment to go and consult the oracle. If the goat did not shake, the god was letting you know that it wasn't a good moment.
The Day of Atonement, called in Hebrew Yom HaKippur, was considered to be the most holy day of the Hebrew calendar. It was the day when atonement was made for the sins of the priests, the people, and the cleansing of the tabernacle. Once cleansed, the high priest went to the gate to receive the animals required for the sacrifices: a bullock, 2 goats, and a ram. This is clearly what God prescribed and commanded. Blood sacrifices illustrated a key principle which God wanted his people to understand. 2 nearly identical sacrifice rituals were performed one after the other. The first was a bullock to make atonement for the sins of the high priest and the priesthood. The second was one of the goats to make atonement for the sins of the whole nation of Israel. The high priest would then take hot coals from the brazen altar and place them on the incense altar in the holy place. The sweet aroma from the burning incense, representing the prayers of the nation of Israel, filled the air and rose upward as the high priest offered prayers to God.
Fumes were a mystery to scholars and scientists. Ancient sources describe a fragrant breeze that rose from the temple and covered the city of Delphi. And in the 1990s, geologists found 2 fault lines that crossed exactly at the center of Apollo's temple, the spot where the oracle sat. Greek god Apollo killed the python, whose corpse then fell into a large crevice in the earth. Powerful vapors rose up from the crevice, causing hallucinations when they were inhaled. The people of Delphi believed the fumes came from the rotting corpse of the python, and that they gave mortals a way to hear messages from Apollo.
The Bible calls heaven eternal bliss. I don't care how blissful it is, it's eternal. You'll get used to it, and then you'll be fucking bored. And what's hell meant to be like? Fire and brimstone and eternal agony? That's what's written in the Bible. That's God's book. As far as I know, the devil hasn't brought out a book. We don't know his side of the argument, right? If you ask me, the devil and God are having an argument. The devil's being a bigger fucking man, because God's just writing shit about him. And the devil's going, I'm not even going to fucking comment, son, if you talk about me like that. Let's think about this rationally, right? Which isn't a good point for the Christians, rational thought. Fire and brimstone and eternal agony. That's what's hell meant to be like. That's written in the Bible. Now, God runs the entire universe except for one place, which is run by hell. And the devil is run by the devil. And now the devil is his biggest enemy, and they don't get along whatsoever, right? Now, if you act bad, you go to hell, right? Now, you've lied, you've cheated, you've stole, you've been a prick your entire life. Why would the devil punish you? You're one of his boys. He's going to fucking dig you. That's where all the hookers and drugs are going to be. You don't think they're going to make their way into heaven? Don't think God's going to open the gate and go, Jim, you've been such a good guy. See this big-titted whore with a line of coconut? Knock yourself out, son. And what's meant to happen when you die and go to heaven? You see a big bright light. You walk towards the light. What's at the end of the light? All your dead relatives. Well, whoop-de-fucking-do. You ever spent a weekend at your grandparents' house? It's fucking shit! You'd be out there for an hour going, wish all me friends would die. Be out there meeting everyone. Hello, Nana. Hello, Granddad. Hello, Uncle who used to touch me. How did you get up here? Oh, that's right, you used to work for the church. You hear that little groan when I said that? When I said you have to work for the church? It's because religious people are in the crowd and they don't like hearing facts. That's a fact. There's been pedophiles in the Catholic Church. It's been on 60 Minutes. Fucking fact. But I say, and it's like, oh, no. Because religious people will forgive God for fucking anything. If he, in their mind, he does good things. Rainbows, children's laughter, shit like that, right? But when he does bad things like hurricanes, AIDS, cancer, child molestation, then we just go, oh, well, God works in mysterious ways. What type of an excuse is that? What is mysterious about acting like a fucking asshole? That is like the least mysterious activity since the dawn of time. If I ever date a religious girl, she's going to come home and I'm going to be raping her mum, right? And she's going to look at me and go, what are you doing? And I'm going to go, I'm mysterious. I've always been mysterious. See, religious people are just fucking stupid. We're short back then. We're all taller now because of evolution. That's how Jesus could feed the people with 2 fish. Little fucking people, big fuck off fish. So this is Jesus here, right? He's a little tiny Arab Jew. He looks like Super Mario. Now, if Jesus is this big, that means his cross was maybe that big. There was a guy called Noah, and Noah built a boat, and Noah lived to be 950 years old. But they never mention that in sermons because we might think it's bullshit. And Noah was thousands of years before Jesus, so Noah's about this big. There's little Noah with his long hair and his great big beard. He looks like a glorified chess piece. And he built a boat, and they put all the animals on the boat, and We had 2 of each animal, and he lived in like Afghanistan back when it was a God-loving place. And all the animals came and they all swam there and shit. They all made it there in like a week, all the kangaroos and all that type of stuff. Then he worked out some type of refrigeration system to keep the polar bears cold and the lions hot. And he made the door on the ark very small so that the dinosaurs couldn't get in because he was a thinker. Then he had storage areas for all their delicate diets, because we all know what picky fucking eaters pandas are.